Chapter 1726–1750 Supremacy Games 1726 The commander of the Vibrational Guards. Some time later, Felix and Apollo were still hiding in the dark in utter silence. They had told Zephyr to not contact them even after Uranus had left the brothel, since he could tap into their private conversation within the frequency's hub. He might not have bothered to do it before, but after he discovered that suspiciously destroyed room, he might give it a try just to make sure. Thus, throughout the whole week, they remained completely silent, occasionally communicating telepathically even after Zephyr had given them a clue that Uranus was no longer seen in the city's vicinity. The mercenaries' trial is about to start in a couple of hours. Apollo broke the silence at last. We have to get going now. I don't know, I have a feeling that Uranus is still somewhere in the city. Felix replied telepathically. It can't be, the Vibronix Empire is massive and it has millions of cities and towns in its territory. Apollo shook his head. With such negative results for an entire week and his impatient personality, he should have taken off for another city. Only after he clears all the cities would he decide to stick around longer in the capital. Apollo was correct in his assumption. If Uranus was already somehow convinced that Apollo and Felix would bother to come here, he might have given the search a bit more investment even when it came back empty-handed. But since this was Eris' idea from the get-go and he believed that those two would have hidden in an unfamiliar low-key nation, he wanted nothing more but to finish his search and prove Eris wrong. Still, let's keep using our abilities until we arrive at the Royal Guards training grounds. Felix stressed, still not convinced. As you wish. Apollo shrugged his shoulders at Felix's cautiousness and controlled his darkness laws to move within the dark spaces. Since both of them were technically still attached to a surface throughout the whole ordeal, the Quantar didn't give them a hard time. After notifying Zephyr about their departure, they took off toward the majestic palace in the distance, taking advantage of the shadows of vehicles, pedestrians, buildings, and whatnot. As long as there was light available, shadows would always tag along. In this sneaky manner, they arrived at last at the Royal Guards training ground, the chosen area for the mercenaries' trials. If it was up to them, they would have ignored joining the Vibrunxian squads and headed to the echoing tower on their own. However, there were a couple of hiccups. The first one was the location. The echoing tower's location was constantly changing with each emerging floor as it was capable of moving through space-time easily. Thus, sometimes, no one would find it even after billions of years, and by then, they found out that the tower had already added a couple of floors. If Felix and Apollo wanted to follow the Vibrunxian squads to the location, it would be nearly impossible since they were capable of altering the reality around them through quantum energy. With such powers, no one could find them unless they allowed it. The second hiccup was that the entrance to the echoing tower opened up for a short period and there would be thousands of the strongest beings in the quantum realm gathered around it, waiting patiently. To maintain order and avoid preventing any rats from sneaking inside, all the quantum nations had placed a collective decision to stop individual participants. This forced the mercenaries to seek out escorting the nation's troops to obtain an entrance badge, otherwise, if they got caught without it, all the troops would turn on them and this would represent the nation's stance as well. In other words, blacklisted for life from any nation. While Felix and Apollo couldn't care less about this, the location problem was something unavoidable. Thus, to avoid unnecessary trouble, they felt it was less complicated to be mercenary escorts, and when they got inside, they might ditch them straight away and carry on with their true purpose. Some time later, Felix and Apollo could be seen standing shoulder to shoulder at the training grounds. It was a vast expanse of meticulously maintained arenas and dangerous obstacle courses, all designed to test the mettle of those who wished to serve as mercenaries under the Vibronix flag. Around them, there existed hundreds of mercenaries roaming the place, their postures ranged from confidently relaxed to nervously tense. While Felix seemed quite relaxed and unbothered, his senses and guard were sharpened to the limit. Will you relax? Uranus is gone, he must have taken a portal to another city by now. Apollo rolled his eyes at Felix's over-the-top wariness. You could never tell. Felix replied with a serious tone, unless I receive confirmed information, I won't lower my guard for a moment. You do you, I guess. Apollo left him at peace and started sweeping his eyes on the mercenaries, desiring to find fresh pieces of meat to indulge in. His creepy gaze hadn't gone unnoticed as most females and even males felt shivers course down their spine like they existed pried on by a predator. What a creep! His handsomeness is wasted on him. Can't he hide his intentions a little? Some ignored him and some gave him cold glares. But, that didn't stop him. There are sure some feisty ones, don't you think? Apollo was forced to stop speaking after turning to the side and seeing that Felix was no longer beside him. His eyelids twitched after noticing that he moved tens of meters away, seemingly having no intentions of receiving addressed in the same breath as him. He will come around sooner or later. Apollo chuckled while switching his attention to an approaching figure from the main gates of the training grounds. What a cutie! He licked his lips after realizing that the figure was a female clad in shimmering silver armor that reflected the light in blinding arcs. To her side, a dozen Vibranoxians walked a step behind her, their confident strides and expressionless faces made everyone recognize them to be the chosen Vibranxian elites. On her head rested a helmet, obscuring her identity, exposing only her breathtaking eyes. But didn't last for long. With a fluid motion, the figure reached up and removed her helmet, revealing her face to the assembled crowd. Hey! The commander of the Vibrational Guards, BIA. Don't know me, she is the one presiding over this mission. This is receiving serious. For the commander to lead the mission, it means the royal family might have some alternative motives than collecting a few treasures. Gasps and murmurs of surprise rippled through the mercenaries as they recognized the woman before them. It was none other than BIA, known for her unparalleled mastery over the law of vibration and her storied history as a warrior and leader. BIA's silvery hair flowed down her shoulders, framing a face that exuded timeless beauty and wisdom of ages. Her eyes, piercing and full of power, scanned the crowd, commanding silence and respect with a mere glance. The shock of her appearance was discernible among the mercenaries. Many had heard legends of Commander BIA but never expected to see her in person, let alone lead the selection process for the squads heading to the echoing tower. Whispers of awe and reverence spread like wildfire, and all eyes remained fixed on Commander BIA as she prepared to address the crowd. Meanwhile, while Felix was demonstrating the same shocked reaction as his peers, in reality, it stemmed from a different origin. Are my eyes playing a trick on me, or is that BIA? The vibration primogenitor? Lord Loki exclaimed with widened eyes in disbelief. An expression that was shared by most of the tenants as none of them dared to believe what their eyes existed feeding them. Who could blame them? Goddess BIA, the vibration primogenitor was proclaimed dead given that the dawn of time. 1727 The most straightforward trial. How? Wasn't she proclaimed dead by Lord Osiris? Cyclops' massive single eye widened to the limit as he gazed at the vibration primogenitor. Even though most of the primogenitors weren't even born yet when primogenitor BIA had disappeared, all of them believed that she had died since her death string had been cut off. This was confirmed news by Lord Osiris, the primogenitor of death. I always knew there was something fishy about her disappearance. Lady Sphinx remarked with a solemn tone, if she was any primogenitor, I would understand her early death, but as the controller of vibration, it shouldn't have been possible for anything to take her down. Suicide is out of the picture when her disappearance occurred at the very beginning of time. Thor added. The rest of the tenants all felt the same. In their eyes, her death was considered one of the many mysteries in the universe and it always bothered them. They knew that many primogenitors ended up dead in their early days due to their strength and intelligence still being in their infancy stages. However, as one of the first ever born primogenitors, accompanying Lord Zervan, Lord Osiris, and the rest of the lords, her death should have been near impossible. Alas, a confirmation from Lord Osiris was a death sentence. Was she living here all that time? What drove her to do this? How can she still be alive when her death string was cut off? Does being in the quantum realm affect one's life/death status in the matter universe? How come she is the commander of the royal guards? Isn't she considered a foreigner? A barrage of questions left Thor's mouth as he tried his best to make sense of the situation. Alas, the primogenitor BIA was the only one capable of answering such questions. At the moment, she was too busy with addressing the mercenaries. Her voice was clear and commanding, echoing through the training grounds. "I prefer simplicity and clarity in all matters," she uttered, her gaze sweeping across the faces before her. "Currently, the royal family is seeking 10 warriors to embark on a mission of great importance. The selection process will be direct and to the point." Even her voice matched the primogenitor of vibration. They knew this because Lord Osiris had shown them her appearance and voice before her disappearance. "Your task is straightforward: demonstrate your strength and abilities by facing my second-in-command, Dankin. Those who manage to touch him will be selected immediately. The rest will be judged based on the overall merit of their performance." As she spoke, Dankin stepped forward, his indifferent eyes scanning the crowd with an unbothered glint. He was releasing silver-colored visible vibrations from his armor, which entailed his status of being below only the royal family. Without a word spoken, he took a step forward and phased out of existence. When he emerged, he was already standing in the center of the largest arena in the training ground. Suddenly, a small figure stepped forward from the crowd, barely reaching the knees of the surrounding mercenaries. His translucent body shimmered with shades of red and blue, illuminated from within by bioluminescent light that pulsed gently. "So, who among us will take the first step against Dankin?" he said, his voice as high-pitched as a dog's whistle. Yet, despite his diminutive size and funny voice, no one dared to mock or disrespect him. That's because he was of the elusive and powerful race, the dimensional planktons. This race was quite dreaded in the quantum realm due to its ability to sense quantum fluctuations and manipulate space. But, most importantly, he was respected because he was Plix, the leader of the infamous high-ranked mercenary squad called the Quantum Divers. His entire squad was here with him, having his back. "Didn't you listen?" Dankin was the one answering him with a nonchalant voice. "Our commander likes to keep things simple and straightforward." Without needing to say much, everyone narrowed their eyes coldly after realizing that the commander desired them to come all at once to Dankin. There were hundreds of them filling the place, yet, the passing condition was merely touching Dankin once. "Dankin, we have heard about your legendary stories and legacies," Plix remarked with a hint of threat in his voice. "Still, are you sure you want all of us to come at once?" Dankin gestured provocatively for them to come with his index finger. His expression remained unchanged. The mercenaries gazed at each other in silence, seemingly hesitant to be the first to make a move. Although there were hundreds of them, they recognized that their chances of defeating Dankin were slim to none. As the right arm to the commander, he was well known across the empire with his own legendary stories. He fought against an army of Chaoxians toe-to-toe and survived to tell the tale. Thus, even when the condition was merely touching him, everyone decided to play it safe and wait for their peers to weaken him and hopefully result in an opening in his defenses. Just like that, one man stood with a straight back while surrounded by hundreds of mercenaries for more than half a minute, no one daring to take a step forward. "By the way, you have 5 minutes. Commander BIA pressured them with a firm tone. From her voice alone, everyone understood that if the duration ended and no one made a move, she might not bother to pick anyone for the mission. After all, those mercenaries were nothing but extra assistants, or one could say cannon fodders, not an important asset. "Boys, let's show them how it's done," Plix uttered coldly, his high-pitched voice, making him seem more adorable than threatening. His squad stepped forward without an ounce of hesitation. It consisted of 3 additional members. Scylla, a female Vibronixian with blue hair and eyes sparkling with an intensity that matched her vibrant aura. Next to her stood a tall and lean chronophage male who bore a serene expression, his skin had a unique gauzy quality, through which one could see the faint ticking of countless tiny clocks, his essence a literal embodiment of time. His name was Kronos and belonged to the mysterious tribe of chronophages. A small tribe that was under the protection of the Vibronix Empire. They might be protected, but this didn't take away from their strength as they were one of the few races capable of bending time in the quantum realm. Lastly, there stood Fona, a male Luminone whose long, luminous purple and white hair flowed down his back, lighting up the space around him. He resembled Felix greatly besides the shape of his tattoos and the color scheme of his hair and eyes. Obviously, they weren't the only Luminones in the area as there were tens of them, which almost made Felix seem invisible. Together, the quantum divers approached Danker, a confident stride in their steps. The squad positioned themselves around Danker in a square formation. The rest of the mercenaries remained in their positions, but their senses were sharpened to the limit, planning to strike at the first opportunity. Slam! 1728 Danken, the Invincible. Kronos forcefully slammed his palm onto the ground, causing his veins, etched with intricate clock inscriptions, to surge forward without delay. These veins were from his own body and he could control them to twist and turn through space-time itself, making evasion a challenge of near impossibility. As they wrapped around Danken's limbs, the air around him thickened, and time stretched, significantly slowing his movements. Plix seized the moment. With a flick of his wrist, a spatial bullet burst forth, aiming straight for Danken's chest. The mercenaries' pupils thinned out in focus, seemingly planning to collectively strike the instant the bullet landed on Danken. Yet, as it neared, Danken's detached gaze swept left and then the bullet mysteriously halted mid-flight, suspended before Danken's unimpressed gaze. Before anyone could make a sound, Danken voiced calmly, "Switch." In an instant, the bullet and veins positions were reversed, now targeting Scylla. The sudden shift caught her off guard, her eyes widening in shock as she found herself the new focus of her partner's temporal bindings and the impending spatial bullet, now mere inches from her face. Yet, this wasn't Scylla's first rodeo. In almost an instant, her body began to vibrate at an increasing frequency, a soft hum filling the air around her. As her vibrations intensified, Scylla became a blur, her form shimmering as if she was dissolving into the air. With the crowd holding its breath, Scylla achieved perfect resonance with the space-time frequency. In the last nanosecond, before the spatial bullet could make contact, she phased out of the perceivable space-time continuum. The bullet, robbed of its target, passed harmlessly through the space she had occupied moments before, striking nothing but air. As Scylla re-emerged into visibility, a murmur of awe rippled through the onlookers. She had demonstrated a masterful understanding of her innate vibration manipulation while at the same showing that her instincts weren't for show. Not bad. Commander BIA, observing the maneuver, gave a slight nod in acknowledgement of her skill. This head nod alone was enough to secure Scylla's spot in the escorting squad, which made the rest of the mercenaries somewhat restless. In their eyes, they didn't even need to touch Danken and all they could do was receive Commander BIA's approval after showing off their capabilities. Without making a move, it would be nearly impossible to show off. Thus, before the Quantum Divers squad could finish what they had started, tens of other squads joined the battleground with powerful projectiles directed at Danken. Pull back! Plix swiftly ordered a retreat when he noticed the mercenaries' feverish look. He understood that being near Danken at this moment was a death sentence. Boom! Boom! Whoosh! As expected, the area around Danken was showered with all sorts of abilities. Some attacks twisted space, making the ground look like a funhouse mirror. Some were messing with time, making it nearly impossible to have a balanced time pace. There were even a few mercenaries of the race that Apollo disguised himself as. The males were utilizing light abilities while the females used darkness abilities. Then, there were the attacks that made no sense, with colors and lights flying everywhere and vibrations that made the air buzz like giant bees. He is something else. Felix narrowed his eyes in focus as he stayed at the far back with Apollo, avoiding the heart of the battlefield. They watched as Duncan dodged and weaved through all of it like he was part of some high-stakes dance competition. He can alter reality so naturally, I don't even notice him manipulating quantum energy. Felix commentated, if this is the strength of a mere high-ranked guard, what about Commander BIA? What about the royal family and their emperor, Quantix Prime? They owned the realm alongside Chaoxians for a reason. Apollo wasn't too surprised, some of them have been manipulating vibrations for billions of years without dying. They have already mastered whatever there was to master. Although Felix was a Unigen, he understood that he wasn't in his home ground anymore. Right now, Duncan was demonstrating what it meant to be one of the strongest in the realm. Even when hundreds of mercenaries were giving it all to finish him off, none of them managed to touch his armor. With the ability to alter reality, he could easily gain control over all the available laws in the realm. This made it impossible for the mercenaries to land a strike on him when he could just cancel it with a snap of a finger or worse, use it as a counterattack against one of them. Is that all you got? Duncan taunted coldly, as he slapped a spatial blade into the direction of the largest gathering of mercenaries, forcing them to evade with horror painted on their faces. You're gonna have to do better than that if you desire to accompany us. Damn it, we have to change our approach. The mercenaries weren't happy with his taunts or their constant failures, so, Plix reached out to the leaders of their respective squads and convinced them to work together. This changed the whole dynamic of the battlefield. Now, the attacks were coordinated and this helped the mercenaries move freely without worrying about getting hit by friendly fire. Alas, while this had improved their battles a bit, it still didn't change anything. Duncan was as invincible as ever. This kind of invincibility made Felix feel some dread in his heart. He wasn't bothered by Duncan, but by the notion that Uranus would have this kind of power here. This made him realize that he needed to master quantum energy manipulation swiftly. While he could utilize his evil energy to corrupt it and gain control of it, he was still struggling to manipulate the vibrational strings within it to turn into liquid, electricity, and other quantum laws. After all, he still needed to find the right frequencies for those laws to emerge from quantum energy. While it wasn't as hard as finding the quantum energy's frequency, it would take a significant amount of time to learn. Do you think it's possible to reach out to primogenitor BIA and ask for her assistance through using familiarity? Candace tried to help him. It's too risky. Felix shook his head. She might be a primogenitor, but she has disappeared before she could meet the majority. Only Lord Osiris and Lord Zervan had some interactions with her. In other words, Felix would be nothing more but a stranger to her. In fact, he would be a dangerous stranger to her life here since he was from the matter universe. As long as they had no idea about her reason for coming down here, it was too risky to make contact. What about you, Lord Marduk? Candace didn't give up. I never met her once in my life. Lord Marduk shattered her hopes. I will ask Apollo following the end of the trials. Felix added after noticing that time was running thin. What's the plan? Felix turned to Apollo. He had analyzed enough to make him understand that if they wanted to secure their spots, they had to stand out. He didn't want to do this since it would force him to demonstrate things that might expose him. The hero should never make the first move. Let your gracious sidekick handle it. Apollo gave him a faint confident smirk. I will qualify us both. Before Felix might respond, Apollo strolled onto the battlefield with his hands casually tucked into his pockets like he was going to enter a public bathhouse. Usually, when someone stared at the back of his partner, he might feel a sense of reliability and safety. But in this instant, all Felix felt was dread. Why do I have a feeling this F***er will make things worse? He thought inwardly. 1729 You may return home. Who is he? Apollo's casual walk across the battlefield had attracted Commander BIA and her subordinates. It wasn't just his calm that drew their eyes, but also the way he was avoiding the chaos with minimum effort, making him seem like he was an orchestra conductor and the battlefield was his auditorium. The moment Apollo arrived at the heart of the battlefield, he raised a single finger toward the sky, and a white, luminous sphere began to take shape above him. The moon-like sphere glowed softly, but its presence was too dominating, it drew everyone's attention to it. "What is this?" Plix frowned. "Is this a new ability from a Gleamkin?" Kronos asked with a serious expression. "Does anyone know him?" "He is a nobody, Tisk." The rest of the mercenaries momentarily halted their barrage of attacks as they gazed into the luminous giant's sphere. Apollo's reputation as a mercenary was slim to none since he spent most of his time profound in brothels and parties. This made the mercenaries have no faith in him. Suddenly, Apollo snapped his fingers, and the sphere began to dim. The light retreated until only a slender crescent of light remained, which hung in the sky like a celestial sign. Darkness, he is a dual attunement Gleamkin. This sight alone left everyone stunned. Even Commander Bia and Dankin raised an eyebrow in surprise. Their reaction was understandable when Apollo's chosen race was known for having males controlling light and females controlling darkness. However, once in a million, a prodigy was born with a dual attunement that allowed him to control both elements. This news excited the mercenaries as it made them understand that Apollo was not a weakling and might help them tip the scale in their favor. He might have a chance to touch Dankin. Follow his lead. Alas, before they could plan to jump on his bandwagon and get carried, Apollo snapped his finger. In a brilliant flash of light, the crescent marked everyone who gazed at it with an otherworldly glow on their foreheads. Then, there was no then, silence fell upon the noisy battlefield at last as no one spoke or moved. They were transformed into standing zombies, completely subdued by the mysterious power of the crescent light. Even Commander Bia and her squad found themselves caught in this unexpected trance, their wills sapped, leaving them at the mercy of the silent figure who had turned the tide of battle without wielding a single weapon. You, maybe you too. Stay behind, the rest. Apollo clapped his hands twice with a nonchalant attitude, you may return home. The moment the command was given, the chosen mercenaries remained in their positions while the unfortunate ones turned around and headed collectively towards the training ground's main gate, resembling walking undead. In a short moment, 10 mercenaries were left behind, including Felix. I guess this should do it. Apollo waved his hand casually and the giant crescent moon disappeared into particles. Then, he walked back to Felix. After the crescent disappeared, the glowing mark on everyone's forehead was erased. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, the crescent ability that had held everyone in a trance was abruptly cancelled. The once mind-controlled mercenaries, Felix, Commander Bia, and Dankin suddenly snapped back to reality, their expressions a mix of confusion, relief, and lingering fear. What in the world just happened? Felix rubbed his forehead, the crescent mark fading but the memory of the trance still vivid. He always knew that behind the mask of perviness and cowardness, Apollo was a fearsome Unigen due to his 2 extraordinary laws. But still, to have an ability powerful enough to hypnotize even him, the paragon of sins? It was uncanny. Commander Bia, quick to regain her composure, scanned her surroundings, her squad slowly coming to their senses. Explain yourself. Her voice was firm, but the slight tremor bared her concern. She had never expected to fall for a mercenary ability and this made her heart skip a beat. I am sorry about that, you had to suffer by proxy. Apollo shrugged his shoulders, if it makes you feel better, I have saved you the time and chosen the best 10 mercenaries for your mission. When the remaining mercenaries heard this, they didn't know if they should feel scared or excited to have them picked in this manner. Who is this monster? Plix murmured with a tingle of dread in his voice as he gazed at the nonchalant Apollo. While he was glad that his entire squad was chosen to stay behind, the idea of being mind-controlled without him realizing it didn't sit well with him. No one felt like this more than Dankin, who also became a victim of the hypnotize without the ability to break past it. He was absolutely livid at such a humiliation. Who could blame him? He went from an invincible monster who couldn't be touched by hundreds of mercenaries, to a controlled puppet under Apollo's will. What's worse, it happened before his commander and squad mates. His pride as the second-in-command royal guard would never let it slide. "How dare you mess with our commander's trials?" Duncan uttered with a suppressed cold voice while his entire body kept releasing powerful vibrational waves. Rumble rumble. The ground trembled and cracked while the atmosphere seemed to bend against its will with each step he took toward Apollo. "Ayo, relax little buddy, I just wanted to save you guys some time since your commander is such a fan of straightforwardness." Apollo hid behind Felix while defending his approach. "Ask her, those 10 mercenaries are the ones on her radar." Just as Duncan was about to respond, Commander BIA ordered with a stern tone, "Duncan, that's enough." Duncan's steps halted immediately, seemingly unable to go against his commander's orders regardless of his emotions. With an icy glare, he walked back to his post. "You, what's your name?" Commander BIA inquired. Apollo walked into the limelight and subtly flirted, "In a world of shadows, Madam BIA, you're the kind of light I've been searching for. I'm Bolo, at your service and, hopefully, at your side." We are so f***ing cooked." Felix felt his life flash before his eyes every time this idiot used his bogus name. Now, that he uttered it while demonstrating his ability to control both light and darkness, even a moron would connect the dots if they were looking for him. Yet, the F***er was still in the mood to flirt with the commander. Fortunately, it seemed as if Commander BIA had no clue about his identity. "I have never heard of you. What territory were you most active in?" Commander BIA asked with narrowed eyes, unirked by his shameless flirting attempt. "I am a nomad mercenary, I do not operate in any specific territory. I just follow wherever life takes me." Apollo winked, "It has brought me here. Dare I say, fate. Can you stop flirting with her? Don't you identify her to be the primogenitor of vibration? She might recognize us if you keep spewing bullsh*t. Felix swore in anger. He thought that Apollo would have known a bit about primogenitor BIA's situation, but from his interaction, he was certain that he had no clue about her real identity. As he expected, Apollo was left surprised. 1730. Making matters worse. "Are you for real? She is a primogenitor. How can you not know about her? Weren't you part of the primogenitor's creation?" "What part?" "That's all on the 3 rulers." Apollo shook his head, "Me personally, I didn't care about the primogenitors until they started fighting each other. Plus, I have been a frequent visitor to the quantum realm during the old times." "That explains a lot." Felix frowned. He realized that with primogenitor BIA's early departure from the matter universe, Apollo wasn't given enough time to learn about her. Since he focused most of his time on parties and entertainment, he had no real reason to shove his nose in primogenitor BIA's business in the city. Thus, this was the first time he ever saw primogenitor BIA. "Nomad mercenary, how convenient." Duncan sneered, knowing that something was fishy about him. "That's enough, Duncan." Commander BIA didn't want to remain on this subject for long, as this wasn't the right moment for a thorough examination. She gazed at the chosen mercenaries and gave Apollo a slight nod in appreciation. "Indeed, you have filtered out the best ones." "Wait, it worked." Before Felix could feel delighted about passing the trial without moving a finger, Commander BIA switched her focus to him and said calmly, "Unfortunately, I don't do favors." Plix and the rest of the mercenaries snickered in ridicule after they realized that Apollo wanted to sneak his partner into the mission without putting any effort. "He is my precious partner and I cannot operate at full capacity without him in my corner." Apollo gave out an ultimate with a stern tone, "So if he goes, I go." In Apollo's eyes, after he demonstrates strength, he should be considered a valuable asset to the mission, since he even placed the commander under his control. Such a fighter would be a must-have for the Echoing Tower. Alas, his foolish attempt to twist her arms fell flat on its face. "All right then, I guess we will be taking 8 with us." Commander Bia clapped her hands twice as she announced, "Congratulations, you have 2 days to prepare for the journey. Gather here at 9 o'clock sharp." Apollo was left staring at Commander Bia speechlessly. Before he could react, he felt 2 murderous eyes bore a hole at the side of his face, making him gulp out in dread. "Cough, give me a moment, I will salvage th. All I want you to do is to shut the F*ck up and stand in the corner." Felix ordered him with a vexed gaze, "I will fix your mess." His gut feeling had already warned him that Apollo would just make things worse and he didn't do anything to stop him. Now, he was paying the price dearly. "Commander Bia, my apologies for my partner's disrespectful and unruly behavior." Felix walked forward and bowed his head respectfully. "I need to clarify that he does not speak for me, nor have I asked him. I still wish for a chance to join the mission. I am afraid there is nothing more to test." Commander Bia shook her head, "It's meaningless to repeat the process and I have no interest in testing you alone." "It's too late," Dankin added with a stone face, "Commander's word is final. Now, beat it." Felix's expression turned a bit gloomy at her rejection. He understood that the only way to secure another chance was to resort to cheap tricks. Knowing that his options were killed off by Apollo's idiotic ultimatum, he didn't hesitate to give it a go. "What if I defeated your second in command?" Before this shocking and ludicrous could register in their minds, Felix added calmly, "Solo." "Ha, ha 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 ha. Ha dot ha 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 ha. Ho 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 ho." A series of mocking laughter thundered the training ground as both mercenaries and royal guards felt like they had heard the funniest joke in their lives. An A-ranked Luminone defeating Dankin solo? **T, they would have laughed their ass off if he stated he could touch him alone. A challenge that hundreds of mercenaries failed in. The only ones not laughing were Commander Bia and Dankin. While Commander Bia was too stern and professional to mock anyone, Dankin felt like he was being humiliated merely by the premise. "Is this a joke to you?" Dankin uttered with a murderous gaze, "Do you take me lightly after your partner pulled a fast one on me?" "Of course not." Felix replied, his eyes remaining unfazed, "I am sure I can't defeat you if you use your full strength, so my only condition is that you don't use quantum energy." "Quantum energy?" Dankin sneered, "Assuming you can accept me down without quantum energy? You've got big guts, I give you that." Dankin didn't feel an ounce of threat with Felix's condition as he was more than confident in his capability to shatter Felix into pieces purely using his vibration manipulation. "I guess we have to give it a try, or, are you scared?" Felix taunted as he took on a battle stance with a serious expression. Dankin chuckled for a moment before he gazed back at Commander Bia, seemingly asking her for permission to take him on and teach him a lesson. Commander Bia glanced at Felix's face for a moment, feeling a hint of dread creeping up her spine like she was staring at a slumbering monster. "Is it them?" she thought to herself as a recent unfavorable memory resurfaced in her mind. However, she shook those memories away and focused back on the arena. "There is only one way to discover out." "Fine, I will entertain you." Dankin smiled coldly after receiving a head nod from Commander Bia. "Is this really happening?" Plix remarked in surprise while he walked out of the arena with his squad and the rest of the mercenaries. "I can't believe someone will be stupid enough to hand himself on a silver plate to an enraged royal guard." Scylla sighed sympathetically, "He is most definitely going to vent through him." Her assumption was correct. Dankin wanted nothing more but to establish his dominance again after his humbling defeat under Apollo. What better way than to break Apollo's partner into pieces, helping him hit 2 birds with 1 rock. "Fighting, gone. I am rooting for you." Apollo cheered from the sidelines, making Felix's irritation grow even more. Who could blame him? He didn't just create the situation worse, he humiliated a royal guard and sent him for collection. "Let's observe if you can keep up," Dankin challenged. A cold smile played on his lips as he began to subtly manipulate the vibrations around him, causing the ground to hum with unseen energy. Felix, with the confidence born of countless battles, simply nodded. Without another word, he extended both of his hands to the side and slashed them up with his fingernails. The cuts were deep and deliberate, causing a unique green blood to flow freely from the long wounds. The color of the blood didn't alarm anyone, as it was a known fact that Lomunion had green liquid within them. Felix was forced to alter it from red to green through his envy laws for the sake of his disguise. Since the concept of blood didn't exist in the quantum realm, it was considered nothing but a quantum liquid vital for the Lomunion's survival. Thus, the sight was quite shocking, eliciting gasps and cries of alarm from those nearby, especially the Luminon fauna. Has he gone mad? Our liquid of vitality is the same as the Vibronixian's cores. You can't live without it. But, before anyone else could react further, the spilled blood began to move as if alive, coalescing in mid-air. With a flick of his wrists, Felix manipulated the blood with uncanny precision, transforming it into two lethal daggers, their edges razor-sharp and gleaming with a sinister light. Then, with a further twist of his intent, the daggers were connected by a chain, also forged from his hardened blood, creating a deadly weapon. "Shall we start?" he asked with a stone-cold face. 1731 Gone vs Dankin. The moment Dankin gestured his readiness with an indifferent expression, Felix wasted no time and bolted towards him, his chained daggers trailing behind him like vipers poised to strike. Whoosh! Whoosh! As he neared, Felix executed a flawless spin and hurled the daggers straight for Dankin's throat. The air hissed as the blades cut through it, aimed with lethal precision. What a waste of time! Dankin extended his palm forward and unleashed a powerful burst of vibrational energy. The shockwave met the flying daggers mid-air, halting their deadly advance and causing them to hover momentarily before they could reach their target. Unfazed, Felix recalled the daggers back to his hands with a sharp tag, only to launch them once more. This time, he swung them from both sides, creating a deadly arc aimed to ensnare Dankin from two directions simultaneously. As the daggers closed in, Dankin took a step forward and phased out of existence, causing the daggers to smash against each other with a loud clanging noise. "You must be regretting your decision," Dankin disclosed coldly as he continued walking towards Felix under his constant assault. Yet, nothing landed on him. His phasing technique was just bulletproof since it matched his body's frequency with the space-time of a parallel universe, which was the same as taking interdimensional steps. "You are powerful, but your partner has no idea what he is stepping himself into." Plix addressed Apollo from a short distance with an inviting tone. "How about you ditch him and join our squad? We are in need of a gleamkin. If you had any cuties in your team, I might have considered it." Apollo rolled his eyes and started ignoring him. "Tisk, after your boy gets used as a rag, you will come back begging to join my squad." Plix sneered to himself. Meanwhile, the battle wasn't going in Felix's favor at all. Even when he had gotten rid of quantum energy manipulation, Dankin was still a formidable opponent. His control over vibration was to perfection. If he had to be compared to Felix in the spirit realm, there would be a massive gap between them. If it wasn't for the capital city banning any disturbances that might affect space-time destructively, Dankin would have easily vanquished everyone in the training ground with a single vibrational punch. But, the same goes for Felix. If it was possible to apply spiritual pressure on quantum realm beings, he would have already owned the place even during his punishment. Alas, spiritual pressure could be effectively applied only to beings with spirits and souls, hence, the name. The quantum realm creatures were all born out of quantum energy. While they seemed alive and had a breath to them, they didn't possess spirits in the general sense. That's why the spirit realm didn't have a single wandering spirit belonging to the quantum realm. Felix was told by Apollo that the quantum realm's creatures could live for eternity. The only way for them to die was if their body got destroyed beyond repair. Even then, their bodies would merely break into quantum energy and return to the realm's ecosystem, awaiting the day of their birth. As for some of the quantum realm creatures being able to reproduce on their own, he said there were mere theories on this matter and nothing confirmed yet. This is becoming tedious. I was hoping for a more challenging experience from you. Meanwhile, Duncan finally grew tired of the cat and mouse competition after skillfully dodging another of Felix's relentless attacks. Let's end this farce. With a cold gaze that seemed to freeze the very air, he cracked his knuckles and then, in the blink of an eye, he vanished, reappearing behind Felix with such speed that it bordered on the supernatural. Without hesitation, Duncan threw a punch towards Felix's back, aiming to end the duel with a single, killer blow. However, Felix demonstrated his own remarkable agility by rolling forward at the last moment, narrowly escaping the attack. Still facing away from Duncan, Felix swung his chained daggers backward, hoping for a quick counter-attack. Alas, Duncan caught the chains effortlessly, a cold smirk playing on his lips as he sent a powerful vibrational burst along them, straight towards Felix. The move forced Felix to release the chains, lest he be overwhelmed by the attack. Yet, Felix was far from defeated. With a swift motion of his finger, the chains turned liquid, snaking towards Duncan in an attempt to envelop him completely. Crystallize! Felix blurted, preparing to solidify the liquid chains into an unbreakable prison around Duncan. But Duncan was already steps ahead. Useless attempt. With a concentrated effort, he unleashed a vibrational shockwave so powerful it not only repelled the liquid assault but also caused the training ground itself to crack under sheer force. Before anyone could react, Duncan charged back at Felix and unleashed a barrage of condensed vibrational projectiles. This forced Felix to use whatever it took to evade and defend the projectiles, creating a fascinating dance that mesmerized the viewers. I have to say, he is quite a good fighter. His footings are masterful works of art. Where did he learn to move this way? I didn't expect Duncan to fail to land a single assault on him. Haha, Duncan, are you planning to keep taking LS for the entire day? A discussion broke amidst the royal guards gathering behind Commander BIA as everyone seemed quite impressed with Felix's fighting skills. They knew that while Duncan hadn't gone all out, still, making his life difficult wasn't an easy task in the slightest. Meanwhile, Commander BIA, who had been watching the duel intently, neither displayed a positive nor a negative reaction. Deep thoughts seemed brewing in her mind as she gazed at Felix's fighting style. Is it them or not? His fighting style is more in tune with Luminone's. He hasn't used a single ability that was shown by him. Was my intentions wrong? Commander BIA frowned. Knowing that she wouldn't be able to get anything from this, she reached out to Duncan and ordered him to go harder. Your wish is my command. Duncan's expression turned colder as he halted his projectile barrage. When he stopped, Felix did a back somersault and landed in a battle position, his eyes affixed on his opponent. The entire area around him was utterly ruined, yet, not a single scratch was seen on his luminous skin. Seeing the change in Duncan's expression made Felix understand that he was about to go all out for real this time. It seems I can't defeat him purely with my blood abilities. Felix also decided to change his approach as he had no interest in prolonging this battle any longer. Without a moment's hesitation, Duncan brought his hands together for a shockwave clap. This was no ordinary clap as its power resonated with a high frequency designed specifically to target the sensory hearing of anyone within its range. The effect was instantaneous and brutal as Felix found himself dropping to one knee, hands desperately clutching his ears in a futile attempt to block out the agonizing sound. OF*CK, what did we do? Ah! My brain! Chrono, slow the time. Even the mercenaries ended up on the floor and desperately attempting to block the frequencies from frying their brains off. Unbothered by the external causalities, Duncan seized the moment and performed a seismic stomp, channeling all his vibrational energy into the ground. The shockwave traveled rapidly, gaining momentum before erupting in an explosion directly beneath Felix. Boom! The force of the explosion sent Felix soaring into the sky with minimum control over his body. As Felix ascended, Dankin was already in motion, his arms transforming into deadly sonic blades. He disappeared with precision and reappeared before Felix in an instant, ready to deliver a devastating scissor technique that aimed to slice his opponent in two. The crowd held its breath, the silence punctuated only by the hum of Dankin's sonic blades. Well, that was quick. What a nasty combo, Dankin stopped messing around. Is he going for the kill? He sure is pissed. It seemed a conclusive end to the violent battle as the royal guards were already planning to leave the training ground. But, in a twist that left every spectator's heart skipping a beat, Felix's form turned illusionary at the very last moment, causing the sonic blades to slice through nothing. A stunned silence engulfed the training ground at the sight of the sonic blades connecting, leaving even Dankin with widened eyes in disbelief. Hey! Did he just phase out? Impossible! The stunned silence was followed by a collective reaction of disbelief at the notion of a Luminone possessing dual attunement. Their reaction was understandable since dual attunement for a Luminone was even rarer than a Gleamkin being born with the possibility to manipulate both light and darkness. At least, that race was able to utilize only two laws, but Luminones could be born with attunement to every law in the quantum realm. For one to be born with two was a celebratory event. Alas, Dankin was in no place to think about his misfortune of meeting someone rarer than a unicorn in the realm. Before he could recover from his shock, the green blood lying on the ground from before turned into chains and snaked tightly around his form with an unyielding grip. The pointed ends of the daggers found their way to his temples, making it clear to all that he had him at his mercy. The arena, filled with the sounds of battle just moments ago, was now eerily silent, every eye fixed on Felix's form that phased back into existence with his hands holding the chains. "Is this enough to join the mission?" he uttered calmly as he gazed at Commander BIA's slightly dazed expression, completely ignoring the tightened-up Dankin in front of him. 1732 Commander BIA's plight. "You. This isn't over." With a livid expression, Dankin immediately phased out of Felix's bindings and attempted to strike him with a powerful vibrational punch capable of shattering space-time, a forbidden technique within the city's boundaries. Felix, expecting such a reaction, was already in the process of phasing out again to evade the strike. "That's enough." However, before the punch could even cross 1 meter, Commander BIA's stern shout sent a shockwave that landed against the punch and cancelled its vibrations, which turned it into a normal punch. Felix was able to catch it easily with his hand. "Maybe, I was too soft on you." Felix's expression turned colder as he pulled Dankin to him and returned the favor by connecting a fist with his nose. "Arg!" Dankin was hurled into the distance while catching his nose in pain. "I said, that's enough." This time, Commander BIA's authoritative voice reverberated into everyone's ears, forcing them all to fall to their knees like their own bodily vibrations were forcing them to listen. Even Felix and Apollo fell victim to such an ability and found themselves unable to fight against it. What a demanding ability! Lady Sphinx frowned, noticing Felix's entire body vibrated at a cellular level. It was like she took control of everyone's strings that created them and controlled their behavior through them. She is too dangerous. Felix wasn't pleased in the slightest by being controlled, but all he could do was lower his head and be obedient like the rest. At the end of the day, he was a mere Luminone and he had to act like one. After a moment of silence, Commander BIA cancelled her control and freed everyone. Then, she turned around and walked away. While she didn't announce Felix's victory, it was clear that he was accepted into the team with Apollo. "Don't be late," Royal Guard Sierra warned everyone for Commander BIA before following after her. "She's tooed out with her striking silver-colored hair that flowed down her back in soft waves, shimmering with a luster that seemed to reflect the very essence of her vibrational energy. Since the Vibronixian were created out of vibration and were separated merely through gender and color, she resembled Dankin's twin. "Dankin! Let's go!" she yelled from a distance after noticing that he hadn't followed them. Dankin ignored her and kept staring daggers at Felix while still clutching his deformed nose. Unfazed, Felix kept gazing back at him with an indifferent expression. He had held his grounds against a third ruler. If he was intimidated by a mere nobody in the grand scheme of the universe, he should resign his title as the paragon of sins. I will recall this. With one last defeated icy remark, Duncan phased out of existence, and when he reappeared, he was behind his squad. If only I had my control over Pride Sin. Felix murmured, I would have helped him with tuning it out a bit to save him from an early death. After the mercenary trials ended, Felix and Apollo booked a room in a fancy hotel, waiting there until the start of the mission. With Felix having a valid identity now, no one could reject them. Unbeknownst to them, Commander BIA was on to their disguise regardless of the effort put in to maintain it. To be honest, only Felix was putting in the effort, as Apollo acted the same as always, even his name was pronounced somewhat the same. At this moment, she could be seen gazing out into the night, her thoughts spiraled around their enigmatic figures. Could it truly be? Were Gon and Bolo more than they appear? She mulled over every encounter, every battle where they had demonstrated their prowess. Felix's rare dual attunement, and Apollo's dance between light and shadow, which spectacles that defied explanation. Their abilities were not just rare, they were unprecedented. If it wasn't for the information bestowed upon her, she would have merely appreciated their talents and placed the matter to rest. Her fingers traced the rim of her teacup as she was deep in thought. Their personalities, too. They somewhat matched the description even when Gon tried his best to change his attitude. With each sip of tea, BIA felt the weight of responsibility weighing down on her shoulders. A responsibility placed by the most despised enemy in her eternal life. Uranus, what does he want from them? Can I use this to my advantage? She contemplated with a solemn tone as memories of what occurred in the past week resurfaced in her mind. Flashback, 1 week earlier. Uranus's form could be seen reconstructing from vibrational waves somewhere random outside of the city. He had just departed from Zephyr's brothel in quite a bad mood. I have no time to waste on such a mindless search. This is her territory, she would be more fit to find them if they were hiding here. Uranus narrowed his eyes coldly as he looked at the massive palace in the distance. Meanwhile, Commander BIA was in her private quarters, reviewing the echoing tower's floors and strategizing her next move when an unexpected and uninvited presence filled her mind. A presence she knew all too well but never wished to encounter again, the unmistakable mark of Uranus reaching out to her. Then, a voice, as vast as the quantum realm, echoed in her mind. BIA, you have had your fun. But it's time we meet. Outside the city's premises. Now. No, 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 no. This can't be happening. The words struck her like a physical blow, sending a wave of fear crashing over her, followed by a shock so potent it left her reeling in her chair. A tint of hatred, long buried under layers of sternness, bubbled to the surface. She had wished this day would never come, hoped that her new life would keep her hidden from the prying eyes of gods and their whims. Ignore this message at your own risk, BIA, the voice continued, its tone hardening. I've allowed you to have your peace, your little hideaway. But make no mistake, I've always known where you are. Ignore me, and I have no qualms about finishing what I started. The threat was clear, its implications chilling, making Commander BIA feel her hands clench into fists, her nails digging into her palms. The audacity of Uranus, to come now, to threaten her after all this time. With a steely resolve, she whispered back, her voice a mix of defiance and wariness, I am not as weak as before, you don't own me and you will never do ever again. The silence that followed was suffocating, leaving Commander BIA's heartbeats to reverberate across the chamber. Finally, Uranus replied, his tone as cold as ever. Is this how you address your husband? I knew that I had been too soft on you. You are no husband of mine, you monster. Commander BIA lost her cool the moment she heard the husband term, her voice shattered all the furniture in the chamber. If one knew what Uranus had placed her through during the old time, her reaction would still be underplaying it. BIA, I am not here to argue with you. Uranus threatened one last time with an icy voice, I need you for a task, meet me at the provided location. Otherwise, your strength, your little royal family that you're relying on, none will be of use against my wrath. BIA's mind raced, the implications of Uranus's threat and the sudden vulnerability of her position struck her hard. She knew full well just how powerful and horrifying Uranus could be when angered. The fact they were in the quantum realm wasn't in her favor at all when he was the true and only deity of vibration. To confront a god was foolery, yet to hide was to live in fear of the inevitable. With a heavy heart, she made her decision, understanding that her options were non-existent. Fine. I will meet you, Uranus. Don't leave me waiting. Wife. Uranus snorted in ridicule like the contemplated of someone worthy of being his wife was a joke on its own. As the presence of Uranus receded, Commander BIA was left to stare at the colorful sky with a deadpan expression. She felt as if her soul had returned to those horrible times, a period she wished nothing more but to erase from her memory. 1733 The thunderous heartbeat. A few moments later. Under the cloak of dim quantum lights, Commander BIA made her way to the designated meeting spot outside the city's premises. After she arrived, the figure of Uranus materialized before her, his presence as imposing as ever. You've come, Uranus's voice boomed, breaking the silence around them. You've made it clear I have little choice in the matter, BIA replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil that stirred within her. Uranus's gaze seemed to pierce through the darkness, focusing intently on Commander BIA, making her feel like a predator was staring at her. Not known for wasting time, Uranus neither spoke about the past nor checked on her situation here. He produced a spiritual picture and showed it to BIA with a gesture that demanded her full attention. This wretched place holds two individuals of interest to me, he said coldly. BIA studied the picture closely, not recognizing either individual. However, she picked up on their identity being from the matter universe. Thus, for them to be able to enter and remain in the quantum realm for a prolonged period implied that they were at least at a unigen level. That's because she was the only primogenitor with the capability to enter the quantum realm without suffering from horrible side effects. The same side effects Lady Sphinx suffered from while entering the quantum realm through shrinking a sand grain and controlling through a wisp. Since the quantum realm didn't support anything related to spirits or souls, only those with powerful souls at levels of unigens could resist the backlash. As for her, she was using her vibration manipulation to avoid the backlash entirely. Uranus wasn't surprised she didn't recognize them. He went on and introduced them in great detail. He told her about Apollo being able to command light and darkness, his playful and pervy personality, also his name and any information that could be used to see through his disguise. When he started talking about Felix and how he could utilize 7 sins laws, heat laws, void laws, and most likely, liquid, electromagnetism laws, and even vibration, Commander BIA was left utterly stunned. How can there be a unigen with this many laws under him? Isn't this against the universe order and balance? Commander BIA asked with a dazed expression. She might have left the matter universe at a young age, but she still understood that the universe would never allow a singular being to command this much power. I am not here to answer questions, Uranus remarked with a hardened gaze, it will be in your best interest to find them. Actively hunt for them. If, upon my return, you have nothing to show, I will take you back with me and finish what I have started. Commander BIA felt chills course down her spine at such a clear threat, leaving no room for negotiation or refusal. Understanding that it would be in her best interest to agree, she nodded with a lowered head, seemingly accepting her fate. If only you were this obedient, we might not have reached this state. Uranus' voice turned soft as he reached out with his hand, caressing her cheek gently. Commander BIA could only bite her lips tightly until a drip of blood flowed down her chin, holding her boiling hatred and disgust to his touch. While it was gentle, she felt like a piece of dark ice was placed on her cheek. His coldness always showed his true character of being an emotionless monster, who cared about no one but himself. Seeing that she was shaking in her place like she was trying her best not to slap his hand away, Uranus retracted his palm with an indifferent look. "You know how to reach me." The meeting ended as quickly as it had begun, with Uranus disappearing into the ether, leaving Commander BIA alone with her contemplations and disturbed feelings. As she turned to make her way back to the city, her expression was as icy as Uranus' touch. Her mind raced with plans and contingencies. How could she navigate this? How would she protect those under her command from the whims of a god? The answers eluded her at this point. However, after the mercenary trials ended and she was 80% certain about Felix and Apollo's true identities, the answer finally arrived. "The echoing tower, that's my way out of his captivity forever," she murmured as she took a small sip of her tea. Her gaze at the rainbowy quantum lights reflected an untold story of resolve mixed with a tint of madness. A couple of days later, Commander BIA and her squad, accompanied by the chosen mercenaries, stood in front of the dimensional transportation building. It was a fascinating structure, towering above them. The building pulsed with energy, humming softly, a sound that echoed in the bones of all who approached. This building had countless gates per floor, each one a portal to a different destination. The gates were marked with symbols and numbers, a complex system of identification that spoke of places both near and unimaginably far. Usually, this building was packed with travelers from all around the quantum realm. But today, it was reserved for Commander BIA's squad. BIA addressed her assembled team, her voice slashing through the air with clarity and purpose. "Today, we have been tasked with a mission that shall examine us to our very limits. It's more than just a quest, it's a test of our resolve, our strength, and our unity. We will face unknown dangers, navigate through unfamiliar dimensions, and confront powers that defy our understanding." The mercenaries, veterans of countless battles, remained silent, their faces masks of seriousness. They had seen much in their lifetimes, yet the magnitude of the echoing tower instilled a sense of fear and anticipation. "We have been ready for such an opportunity for millions of years," Plix noted with a solemn assuring voice. "Have no concern, for we, the quantum divers, shall have your back throughout the entire journey." "Likewise, likewise." Apollo nodded passionately, making Felix's eyelids twitch. Even though they had signed a contract that forced them to remain with the party and follow Commander BIA's orders, none of them planned on respecting it. That's because the only drawside of voiding the contract was getting blacklisted by the Vibranongsian Empire and get treated as a fugitive. In their case, they were already fugitives. Nods and murmurs of agreement echoed through the group, a tangible sign of their unity and readiness to face whatever lay beyond those gates. Commander BIA nodded in approval. "Then let us proceed." With a final look at the towering gates, BIA led her team forward, stepping towards one of the shimmering portals. One by one, the other teams followed. The dimensional transportation building, once buzzing with the voices of the assembled team, fell silent. After a grueling journey that spanned over 2 months, Commander BIA and her squad finally shortened the distance between them and the tower until it appeared as a tiny black dot from a distance. The portal had deposited them in the nearest area possible to the tower, but the final leg of their journey was left to their own devices. This last stretch wasn't easy in the slightest due to the tower's location being situated in an extremely dangerous zone. But, for a team created out of the best in the Vibranongsian Empire, it merely set them back for a short while. As Felix and the team approached the echoing tower, a sudden, thunderous heartbeat echoed through the air, reverberating across the vast distances of the desolate landscape that surrounded them. The sound was so deep, so powerful, that it seemed to shake the very ground beneath their feet, sending a shiver down the spine of everyone present. "What was that?" Candace exclaimed, her eyes wide with surprise. "What else?" Felix answered with a solemn expression, "It's heart within the echoing tower." 1734 Gathering of the 50 Major Nations. He was already told by Apollo that the echoing tower was called such because of this resounding periodical heartbeat. It was also the main reason why everyone assumed that the stone of reality was the heart of an ancient creature. As they got closer to the tower, the thundering heartbeats became louder while the tower started to come into the picture. After a few moments, the tower stood before them, a colossal formation of pitch-black material that absorbed the light around it, giving the impression of a void in the shape of a tower. It resembled a gigantic cylinder with tree-like branches extending everywhere, defying any natural order or pattern. On these branches hung chaotic portals, swirling with colors that seemed out of place. These portals pulsed with an eerie light, as if breathing, synchronized with the heartbeat that had startled them. The entire tower emitted an ominous energy that stirred a primal dread within their hearts. This is no ordinary structure. It's alive, somehow. Can you feel it? The dread, it's almost tangible. Felix murmured as he gazed at the tower's magnificence. What are those portals? I thought it had only one entry point. Thor inquired. Felix forwarded the question to Apollo and he responded with, those portals might be connected to the tower, but they don't lead within it. Some of them are portals connected to the millions of quantum mazes across the realm, while some are exit points from the tower. Though, these are extremely rare. I see. Felix nodded in understanding while following Commander BIA and the rest to the top of the tower. After a short flight, all of them arrived at the tower's roof. The moment Felix gazed down, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows in surprise. The entire roof was packed with thousands upon thousands of mystical and peculiar creatures. Some were known like the chronographs, Vibronixian, Luminones, and Planktons, while some he merely heard about. Such as the Chrono Walkers, Nanites Swarm, Dimensional Nomads, Quarklings, Chaoxians, and many more. There were 50 major nations across the realm. It was only normal there would be this many powerful and unique races ruling this infinite expanse. Just like they had noticed the gathering, their arrival had unsettled the atmosphere. The Quarkling's leader, a being of shimmering energy that flickered in and out of visibility, was the first to speak with a friendly and warm tone. What a surprise, Commander BIA. I didn't expect you to lead the mission. Long time no see, Monkey R. Commander BIA nodded back respectfully. We don't know when the tower will teleport next, so we might as well commit our full resources to each journey. Haha, I couldn't agree more. Virona, the head of the Nanites swarm, joined the conversation with a somewhat metallic laughter. Just like his swarm behind him, his body was constructed out of billions of tiny silver wasp-like creatures, making his appearance resemble a magnified version of the little ones. Suddenly, a Chrono Walker, whose appearance seemed to flash with shadows of the past and future, stepped forward. It seems like everyone had the same thought. Tempus Vey said, his emotionless voice echoing as if spoken across centuries. The rest of the leaders all gazed at each other with solemn expressions. No one here was a nobody. All the leaders enjoyed high status in their nations, as some were army commanders, heads of royal troops, police chiefs, or even members of the royal family. The Chaoxians had sent an actual prince to lead the mission, and at the moment, he was seen sitting on the corner of the roof with his squad members surrounding him. Unlike the Vibronixians, the Chaoxians seemed to not take in any mercenaries from different races. Only 10 Chaoxians were running the task, and yet, not a single person here dared to disrespect them. While the other races didn't dare to interact with them due to their fickle and aggressive nature, the same didn't apply to the Vibronixians. Dankin called out, his voice laced with mocking amusement. Oh, look! It's the Prince of Pandemonium himself. What are you doing here? I am surprised you managed to find your way when your mind is all f***ed up with chaotic thoughts. Prince Malakar, upon hearing the taunt, paused. The other squads, accustomed to the unpredictable nature of the Chaoxian, braced themselves, unsure of how he might react. Yet, Prince Malakar simply turned towards the direction of the voice, his demeanor calm, almost amused. With a voice even and unfazed, Prince Malakar responded, "Dankin, is it?" Mockery is a curious choice of weapon against one who thrives in the unpredictable. But then, I suppose when faced with the vastness of chaos, one clings to whatever semblance of control they can muster. I am surprised you managed to connect such big words without attacking mid-sentence. Dankin snickered, "After all, you wish you had our kind of control." The rest of the viewers couldn't help but smirk faintly, knowing that Dankin had struck a nerve. As expected, the Chaoxians behind Prince Malakar had gotten antsy, their gazes were as voracious as a starving pack of wolves. The Chaoxians might be powerful and considered one of the top 3 most authoritative races in the realm, but still, they had a massive drawback. They could not control order within them since they were born with high attunement to chaos. This caused some of them to even attack their own families on a whim, commit suicide, stage a coup, go on a random conquest, and more screwed up decisions. This turned their empire into a foreigner-free zone since no one could handle existing in the same area as those lunatics. Chaos, dear Dankin, is not just destruction. It is creation, potential, and the very essence of change. You see disorder, I see the fabric of possibilities. But worry not, Prince Malakar continued, his tone taking on a lighter note, seemingly unaffected by his ridicule, "I bear no ill will for your jest. Consider it an invitation to behold the art of chaos. Perhaps, you might learn a thing or two." The coolness of his retaliation, devoid of anger or irritation, left and feel far more impactful than any display of power could have. "Is this the Chaoxians you described to me? You said they are easily agitated and one should avoid them because of it." Felix raised an eyebrow with a hint of respect at Prince Malakar's mature reaction. "This is not normal, something is fishy." Apollo scowled with a look of confusion, "Whether it is a prince or an emperor, none of them will eat such a public insult and do nothing about it. Their nature makes it impossible." Even Commander Bia, Dankin, and the rest of the Vibronixians were left baffled. Commander Bia didn't care about Dankin's offences since Chaoxians were their mortal enemies and this was nothing but a normal occurrence between them. Piss them off, pick a fight, teach them a lesson, rinse and repeat. However, it seemed like the Chaoxians had ascended such petty confrontations. "What's going on? I kind of feel stupid now." Dankin gazed at his squad mates with a bewildered look, having no clue how to move on now. 1735 The bizarre topmost floor. "Put it to rest, Dankin," Commander Bia ordered, relieving him of the awkwardness. Dankin took advantage of the chance to throw one more insult before giving up on picking a fight with them. "This has never happened before. Have they figured out a way to control their chaotic thoughts? That can't be right." Scylla communicated with the squad through an encrypted frequency channel. "That shouldn't be possible." Sira shook her head, "The Chaoxians have been unable to control their thoughts ever since their birth. It should be a mere fluke." Dankin sneered, "Should I continue pressing them? It will be more helpful to us if we manage to get rid of some of them before the opening of the tower. Knowing that a battle ought to break up between them within the tower, they might as well kick it off right now, right here. At least, there would be fewer variables that might affect their victory." When it came to variables and unpredictability, Chaoxians thrived in such environments. "No, we must maintain as much strength and energy as possible," Commander Bia remarked sternly as she gazed at the powerful leaders around them. "It's clear, we aren't the only ones with the same goal in mind." Unlike the mercenaries, Dankin and the rest of the royal guards all showed serious expressions. Their eyes were still clouded in confusion about the true purpose of the mission since Commander Bia hadn't given them the details yet. "Our intentions might be correct." Felix narrowed his eyes, "This mission might not be for collecting treasures on surface level. Why bother? We will be ditching them either way." Apollo replied lazily. Felix remained silent, having a feeling that it might not be as simple as that. After an arduous week of waiting, tensions high, and patience wearing thin. Suddenly, the echoing tower started to shake akin to being hit by a 9th-degree earthquake. Without warning, the tower pulsed. Ka-thum! A deep, resonant heartbeat, louder and more forceful than any that had come before, echoed through the air. It was a sound so robust that it bordered on the physical, vibrating through the bodies of those assembled, rattling bones and forcing many to their knees. The heartbeat was not just heard, it was felt, a primal force that resonated with the core of every being present. Yet, no one lost their focus or acted out of place. They started to scan across the tower's roof with penetrative gazes. Then, near the center of the tower's roof, a harmless crack emerged. Ka-thum! With another heartbeat, the crack began to widen, the very stone and substance of the tower seeming to breathe and shift. What had been a mere sliver in the surface expanded, growing into a gaping maw. As the crack opened fully, revealing a dark, yawning entrance into the topmost floor of the echoing tower, the commanders shouted orders, rallying their squads as the initial shock wore off. Prince Malakar led his squad towards the gaping pitch-black abyss and everyone gave them room for it. Even when they showed bizarre control of their aggressive nature, no one was stupid enough to trust them to behave. Thus, it was best to put some distance from them within the tower. After his subordinates went in, Prince Malakar turned to gaze at the Vibronixians while he was standing at the edges of the crack. Then, he said with an emotionless tone, "See you inside." Before anyone could respond, he jumped inside the abyss. "He thinks we scared of them." Dankin requested with a cold tone, "Can we chase them down?" "No, there will be plenty of opportunities to face them." Commander Bia said calmly, "Remember, this is a marathon, not a battle." Soon, the squads crossed the threshold from the known into the unknown one by one until only Commander Bia's squad was left behind. "Go ahead." Commander Bia ordered Felix and the rest of the mercenaries to go in first. Without questions asked, Plix led his team to dive first into the crack, and the remaining 4 followed suit. "See you below." "Woohoo!" Apollo made a peace gesture as he backflipped inside the abyss, not feeling an ounce of fear from the unknown or shame. Is it in his nature to try and embarrass me at any given second? Felix murmured in irritation after being left with everyone's judging stares. After taking a deep breath, he jumped in too. Plunging into the dark crack, Felix felt the world around him dissolve into shadow, a sensation of falling through endless nights gripping him. But as suddenly as the darkness had enveloped him, it receded, leaving him free falling across a blue clear sky with bits of white clouds here and there. Yet, what struck Felix with a sense of astonishment was the serene and majestic landscape that unfolded before him. A vibrant grass field surrounded by forests, rivers, and trees, which mirrored the beauty of the common environments in the matter universe. Thud. Landing on the soft, verdant earth, Felix's slightly widened mouth was filled a bit with dust and dirt, yet, he didn't bother to close it. How? No one knows. Apollo appeared next to him as he answered with a tint of marvel in his voice, "Such an environment is too common for us, but to see it here, in the quantum realm, it must be the strangest phenomenon ever experienced." It seemed like the rest of the squads were also awed and mesmerized by the environment. However, it was for a different reason. They never had seen something like this, while Felix and Apollo were shocked by the notion of a tower's floor mimicking the reality in the matter universe. Is everything here made out of quantum energy? Or is this the real deal? Felix soon jolted his head, "It can't be. It will mean we have been sent to a dimension outside of the quantum realm entirely mirroring the matter universe." Felix understood that was impossible since their sizes would have to forcefully return to normal while the quantum natives wouldn't even be able to exist. After all, quantum energy was too small to exist in the matter universe. As long as you are in the echoing tower, nothing is impossible. Lilith shared a piece of advice with a knowing expression. "You mean my assumption right?" "Of course not, are you dumb?" Lilith rolled her eyes at him. Felix's lips twitched, but he couldn't retort as he had walked himself into getting insulted. He realized that since they were still on the topmost floor of the tower, the reality disturbances weren't strong enough to create such an impossibility. In other words, this must be a mere external copy of the matter universe made out of quantum energy. Is it just me, or does it resemble Earth's environment a bit too much? Candace tilted her head in confusion after noticing many tree species from Earth, such as maple tree, oak tree, willow tree, and more. You're right. Felix raised an eyebrow in surprise. There are many other species unrelated to Earth. Lady Yggdrasil shook her head, not thinking too much of it. It could have mirrored most of the trees in the universe. Most likely. The rest agreed and dropped the subject. Seeing everyone move on, Candace could only shrug her shoulders and drop it too, even though she still had a weird tingling feeling about it. Soon, Duncan, Sira, and the rest of the royal guards entered the floor and grouped up near a massive maple tree. After waiting for a short moment, Commander BIA joined them. What took you so long? Plix frowned. Is everything okay? Don't concern yourself over me. Commander BIA replied with a firm tone. Plix didn't like her response, but as an escorting mercenary, all he could do was zip his mouth. Uncaring about his feelings, Commander BIA reached inside her armor and brought out a small red bag. Then, she pulled out a rugged-looking brown scroll with a black rope keeping it tightly rolled up. Seeing the scroller 10 times bigger than the red bag created it clear that it was a dimensional inventory. This didn't surprise either Felix or Apollo, as both of them had bought their own through Zephyr's assistance even when it was incredibly difficult to get one's hands on them. If it was up to Felix, he would have fetched with him his spatial rings or AP bracelet, but there was no way he could shrink them too. Thus, he departed them behind in a secured place until his return. Without further ado, Commander BIA tapped on the scroll and dropped a bombshell on them. This is a map leading to the first floor. Our main mission is to reach it and retrieve the Stone of Reality. Our secondary mission is to explore the bottom floors and obtain any kind of treasure in it. Felix, Apollo, and the mercenaries were departed utterly speechless, feeling like she was pulling their leg. You joking, right? Do I look like I am in the mood? 1736 The map of Echoing Tower. How did you get your hands on such a relic? Is it even the real thing? A map of the tower? It sounds too good to be true. Felix asked with a deep scowl. This new development made him postpone ditching the squad. The situation was just too bizarre. Nations were struggling for eons to reach even the top 10 floors without dying or getting lost. Just when he decided to participate for the sake of getting rid of the celestial chains, a magical map popped off. He refused to believe in such a coincidence. I guess I owe you an explanation at least. Commander BIA shared, during our last exploration, we secured a copy of this map on the 100th floor. Our people have failed to clear the floor from the all-seeing eye and most of them ended up dead. Only one managed to escape the tower successfully from a random portal that kicked him out of the tower into a quantum maze. He reached out to us and we helped him return to safety. At that point, he had no clue that this map had a detailed, outlining paths, traps, exit points, and, most importantly, hints towards the tower's core. How is that possible? Scylla covered her mouth in shock. Doesn't this mean someone must have traveled the entire tower from top to bottom, documenting every little detail about it? This piece of news had startled the rest as well. How can there be a detailed map of the tower when no one managed to reach the first floor? Plix remarked. Does it have to do anything with your previous mission? Felix addressed Lilith, knowing that the upper celestial Unigens were the only ones who made it near the Stone of Reality. How can it be related to us? Lilith gave him a lazy look. We entered the tower when it had merely 10 floors, while the map must include much more. Otherwise, those idiots wouldn't court their death by following a half-finished map. Makes sense. We have also been seeking the answer to this question. Commander BIA replied with a solemn tone. Unfortunately, no one knows, as the map wasn't found as a scroll. It was engraved in a giant stone plate and our people managed to copy it on scrolls. Soon, She turned her head and gazed at the other squads. Now, it becomes painfully clear that this information was not kept as secure as we hoped. The very fact that every major nation has sent their best here is evidence enough. The map has been copied by other people and leaked on a wider scale. It only took another map in the hands of greedy person and he would make a fortune by selling it to other nations. How sure are you that it didn't leak from your side? Plix frowned. Because it was me who survived the tower and brought out the map, Duncan disclosed coldly. When they heard this, no one dared to accuse him again. Duncan might be arrogant and full of himself, but his loyalty to the royal family was uncontested. With everyone in possession of a map's copy, this will complicate our mission. We're not just navigating the tower's dangers but also contending with every skilled squad that has entered this race. Commander BIA brought the main subject back. We're up against the best, which means we'll need to be even better. Hold on, we never agreed to this. One of the mercenaries in the other squad shook his hands with a hint of dread in his eyes. It was only normal he would have cold feet. He is right, the only reason we joined the mission is because we thought we would remain in the top 5 floors. Plix agreed with a solemn expression. Have we said or written in the contract that we will remain in the top 5 floors? Commander BIA responded calmly. No. But. There is no buts. Commander BIA gave everyone an emotionless gaze. You are all free to follow us as per the contract terms or you can leave the squad and get entrapped here forever. Just to let you know. Duncan snickered. The first sign of portals appear on the 100th floor, and the ones after it. Even those portals mostly lead to lower floors or the void. So, it's not in your favor to ditch the squad and act on your own. The mercenaries felt shivers course down their spine. Even Felix and Apollo had no clue about this hidden fact. It might not seem like much, but they understood that the tower's true dangers start after the 100th floor. The topmost 5 floors were still considered safe due to being newly created and the dimensions within them were stable. This might be the reason why portals didn't open up in them, as the spatial stability must be top-notch. So, what do you think? Apollo asked Felix with a serious tone. What I think is we need to get our hands on the map. Felix narrowed his eyes on the closed scroll, using various types of visions to see through it. He understood that this map was currently the greatest treasure in the tower if it was truly the real deal. If they managed to obtain it, they could even go much deeper into the tower with minimum risk. Since the lower they had gotten, the more screwed up the time would be, there would be a big chance of them landing in a place that had a time difference of millions of years to seconds. While he would be forced to spend millions of years in it, by the time he comes out, mere seconds had gone on the quantum realm. In other words, he wouldn't need to fear for his life anymore from the hunters on his tail, since he would be able to enlarge his size and enter his void realm. In his realm, no one could contest against him. Alas, all of those dreams and thoughts disappeared after realizing that the content of the map was written in coded vibrating strings, each releasing a unique frequency. Damn it, it's impossible to read it without knowing the coded language. Felix was left displeased. We can always steal it from other teams. Apollo suggested while gazing at the spread-out squads. They are not dumb to not code it too. Felix shook his head, which means, if we ditched our team and sought after them, we would be forced to fight them. While Felix recognized that Apollo could enslave them by using his hypnotizing darkness/light crescent ability, he also comprehended that it wasn't the time for battles. There were 50 squads and each had more than 10 strong fighters. Since the topmost floors didn't have much danger to them, anyone who made a move would cause a chain reaction that wouldn't end well in their favor. If it is going to end like this, we might as well stick with the team and wait for a better opportunity to snatch a map during the chaos. Felix stated with a sinister smile, with everyone possessing the same information, there is bound for chaos to arise. Seems good enough for me. Apollo agreed with his head resting behind his hands. 1737 I am already inside. It appeared like the other mercenaries also realized that they had no better option, but to stick with the squad even when they were heading to the bottom of the tower. After all, the map had the exit points written on it too, which meant their only way out was when Commander BIA decided to leave. "We expect a better payment if we return," Plix remarked coldly. "Don't worry, none of you will be mistreated," Dankin promised, but a hint of cruel ridicule could be picked up from his tone. No one thought much of it since it matched Dankin's *TTY personality. "Let's start searching for the entrance to the next floor," Commander BIA ordered while taking the lead. "We have wasted enough time chit-chatting. Should we spread out to cover more grounds?" Sira suggested. Since this was the newest floor, the map didn't have details on how to leave it. The same applied to the rest of the topmost 5 floors. Only when they arrive at the 100th floor would it start being effective. Fortunately, the 5 topmost floors weren't too dangerous and their only difficulty was locating the entrances. "No need, I have communicated with the rest of the leaders and made a unanimous decision to share the entrance point with all if anyone located it," Commander BIA replied. The race would officially start only when the squads arrived at the 100th floor. The Chaoxians weren't brought into this decision as no one could trust them. Commander BIA suddenly gazed at the clear sky and more specifically, at the invisible one-way entrance to the tower. While it couldn't be spotted, she could sense its vibrations still going strong. She knew the entrance would remain open for a minimum of a week and a maximum of 2 weeks. This was quite an extremely short period considering that time was almost irrelevant to the quantum realm citizens. He should be on his way here. "I have to go as deep as possible before his arrival," Commander BIA murmured to herself. Her expression was as stoic as ever, but her true emotions were jumbled, for she was going to do something she never would have dared to consider in the matter universe. Sometime earlier, Commander BIA was the only one left behind on top of the tower's roof. She gazed at the gaping abyss with a mixture of fear, hesitation, and worry. It was like she was having second thoughts on an important decision. But soon, she tightened her fists, and the hesitation was erased from her eyes behind the helmet, replaced by unmoving decisiveness. "This is my only chance to close this hideous chapter from my life once and for all. I cannot falter and run away in fear anymore, for there is no place in the universe that can hide me from him." Realizing that even living in the smallest and vastest dimension in the universe wasn't enough to secure her safety was enough to seal her decision. Without further ado, she reached out to Uranus' unique frequency and established a communication link with him. "I have reason to believe that the very individuals you seek, have infiltrated my team as mercenaries." There was a pause, the briefest moment of silence that seemed to stretch for an eternity. Then, Uranus's voice tingled with interest, responded. "Is that so? Where are you now?" "We are about to enter the echoing tower," Commander BIA replied, not wanting to let him on the truth that her squad was already inside. If she lied and said that she was also within it, he wouldn't believe her since the echoing tower cut off every communications from the outside. "The echoing tower?" Uranus asked coldly, "What are you doing there? Why have you told me this late?" "I have been sent on a mission by Quantix Prime. I wasn't suspicious of their identity until now since they are using a well-crafted disguise." Commander BIA continued mixing truth with lies, "It's only now that one of them has used an ability from the provided intel. Of course, I am merely 50% confident about my judgment. It's best if you wait until we leave the echoing tower. I will obtain more information to confirm my suspicion." "No," Uranus ordered coldly, "give me the tower's location and don't enter it, I am coming to you right now." "Absolutely not." Commander BIA hardened her tone, "If Quantix Prime heard that I gave up on the mission, he would have my head on display for all." Before Uranus could respond, Commander BIA pressed on while giving him the location's details. "I didn't call for your permission, I contacted you to inform you of my suspicion. Do whatever you want with the intel, I am heading in." "You better not." Commander BIA cut off the connection with a deep breath and a hand resting on her chest, feeling like it was about to beat out of her body. Then, with a determined gaze, she jumped into the abyss, going against her ex-husband's order for the first and last time. As the connection with Commander BIA severed, the air around Uranus crackled with barely contained fury. "Daring to bait me to the tower to get rid of me?" Uranus uttered with an icy tone. "Staying in the quantum realm seems to have made you delusional and overconfident." Even with all of her attempts to hide her true motive, Uranus was just too shrewd and sharp to not figure it out. The question now was whether she was luring him into the tower without Felix and Apollo being near her, though, he was 90% certain that she wasn't lying, as he would easily pick up on it. Knowing that he needed a second opinion on the matter, he decided to call Eris and Demeter against his will. "Eris, Demeter," Uranus's voice boomed across the ethereal link, "I have just received news that our targets are in the Echoing Tower." "The Echoing Tower?" Demeter raised an eyebrow in surprise. "I have just heard about it and was wondering if those two will attempt to enter it for the sake of accelerating the punishment duration." "I thought so too." Uranus, his rage giving way to cold, calculated intent, replied, "I will head there first. I'll slow duration around the portal to keep it open until you arrive." "No need to trouble yourself with duration manipulations for my sake, Uranus," Eris suddenly remarked. "Why is that? Do you have a different plan in mind? Or are you doing this out of spite?" Uranus sneered. "There is no need to trouble yourself, because..." Eris paused for a moment prior to adding with a calm voice, "I'm already inside." "Hey! What?" Both Uranus and Demeter were left stunned at her statement. Not bothering to explain to them, she added, "I already know whom she is suspicious of. I am not at my peak. So, I will be awaiting you." Back to the present, within the topmost floor of the tower. Prince Malakar, his gaze, ever-changing and unfathomable, wandered across the sea of faces prior to him, each member of the assembled teams lost in their own search for the next floor's entrance. Soon, his eyes settled on Felix and Apollo. For a moment, Prince Malakar's interest seemed piqued, a flicker of recognition, or perhaps anticipation, crossing his features. In that brief instant, Prince Malakar's eyes, those swirling vortices of chaos and color, shifted dramatically, mirroring perfectly the eyes of Eris, the goddess of order and strife. Then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the reflection vanished, leaving no trace of the goddess's presence in Malakar's gaze. He blinked, and once again, his eyes were his own, mysterious and deep, holding an untold amount of secrets within their depths. 1738 The 100th floor. After weeks of navigating the treacherous and ever-changing environments of the first top 5 floors, the squads finally cleared them and arrived at the last entrance, leading to the 100th floor. The journey up until now had been a relentless test of their patience, since the entrances were hidden in plain sight and guarded by puzzles that demanded not just intelligence but a deep understanding of the quantum laws that governed the tower. Yet, the relief of overcoming these obstacles was short-lived. All the squads were seen spread out in front of a giant archway that was pulsing with energy so ominous it made their skin crawl. "Whatever challenges we had faced before pales in comparison to what we are about to experience," Commander BIA warned with a solemn expression. Tempus V, Monkiar, Virona, and the rest of the leaders were also advising their teams to be at their best performance. No one took their words lightly, as they had already been told about what awaited them on the other side. "Do not forget to freeze the instant you pass through the entrance." Commander BIA stepped forward, leading her squad towards the entrance. The Chaoxians were nowhere to be seen while the entrance was found open, which implied that they had already gotten inside. Felix and the rest of the squad followed her closely, stepping into the entrance without an ounce of hesitation. As Felix crossed the threshold into the 100th floor, a tide of cold air brushed against his skin. When he opened his eyes, the sight that greeted him was the same as described by Commander BIA. He found himself standing in a vast, gloomy landscape, where the air was thick with a dreadful fog that seemed to swallow the very light around him. Dead trees, their branches twisted in silent torment, covered the barren dark land that stretched out to the horizon. The ground beneath his feet was cracked and dry like it hadn't tasted a drop of water for eons. In the distance, creepy mountains loomed, their slopes bore the semblance of crying faces, etched into the rock as if mourning the desolation that surrounded them. "It's truly a landscape of despair," Candace murmured. Felix didn't respond as he focused on not moving an inch while his eyes looked up to the sky. Despite the gloom that dominated this realm, the sky above was somewhat clear. Yet, what Felix and the others were focusing on was a massive pitch-black crack, cutting through the center of the sky like a wound in the very fabric of reality. Felix and the rest of the squad stood there for a moment, taking it all in. Then, without an ounce of hesitation, every one of them sprinted at full speed through the barren landscape. "Go! Go! Go!" "We stop after 5 seconds at the decided location," Commander BIA ordered out loud while her gaze was affixed on the pitch-black crack. Since Felix, Apollo, and the rest of the mercenaries had never visited the place and had no clue about the destination, all they could do was stick to the main squad. Whoever gets left behind is done for. So, run like your life depended on it. Plix addressed his squad while teleporting from one place to another. Kronos used his time manipulation to accelerate while Scylla relied on vibrations to phase in and out to keep up. Meanwhile, Commander BIA and the Royal Guards relied on the same technique, helping them cross thousands of kilometers in mere seconds. As for Apollo and Felix, they both jumped on a darkness cloud and accelerated at an unfathomable speed, matching up to the Royal Guards quite easily. If Apollo wanted, he could have surpassed them in the blink of an eye, but since they had decided to remain with the squad, they had to move at their pace. "It's closed. Head to the entrance swiftly." Monkiar, the Quarkling's leader, shouted as he led his squad in the same direction. Quarklings were another race that utilized the laws of light, which enabled them to move at a godly speed. However, unlike the Gleamkin, Quarklings could exist only in an environment with light on, since their bodies reflected the light that gave them their physical form. Without the existence of light, their forms enter a state of quantum superposition, where they could either exist or not. The only way to find out was by casting a light in their area. *T, it's closed. We should have gone first. Quickly, they have gotten ahead of us. Don't rush, it's a marathon, not a race. After stepping inside the 100th floor, the 50 squad leaders each had their command. Some decided to sprint towards the entrance while some preferred to build a stronghold near the entrance, knowing that clearing the 100th floor first wouldn't change the outcome. As they ventured deeper into the eerie expanse, a divide began to emerge, each squad trying its best to leave as much distance as possible from their enemies while at the same time not venturing too far from their destination. Then, each squad started to build a stronghold, using whatever power in their possession. Meanwhile, Commander BIA moved with purpose through the eerie landscape, her eyes scanning the environment for the ideal location to establish their base. Upon reaching one of the creepy mountains, BIA raised her hand, signaling her team to halt. The mountain, with its sorrowful faces etched into the stone, seemed as good a place as any to set up their stronghold. "I think we could go much deeper," Dankin suggested as he glanced at the closed-shut crack in the sky. "It's not worth the risk." Commander BIA rejected. "Our main goal is to leave the 100th floor with minimum casualties while at the same time reducing our competition." Dankin nodded in understanding and quickly sprang into action with the main squad of Royal Guards. Together, they began to weave the quantum energy through their vibration control, manipulating the very fabric of reality around them. The air buzzed with power as the quantum energy solidified, forming the walls and foundations of their stronghold. In moments, a tough colorful structure stood against the mountainous chain, its walls shimmered with a subtle glow. "Kronos, surround us with a temporal ring. Bolo, create a dome of darkness around the stronghold." Commander BIA ordered. "Gon, help us establish a vibrational barricade spanning hundreds of kilometers." Without further ado, everyone tackled their duties, knowing that time was out of essence. In a few moments at best, an unbreachable fortress was born with spatial, temporal, vibrational, and many other unique powers keeping it guarded. Yet, no one felt an ounce of safety as they knew that the true danger of the floor could not be resisted, blocked, or avoided. Get in your positions and take a comfortable posture, it's going to be a long night, Commander BIA said with a solemn expression as she sat down close-legged on the roof of the stronghold. Felix and the rest each chose a comfortable position. Apollo lay on the ground with his hand resting on his palm while Felix leaned against the wall in a seated position. Meanwhile, some of the squads were still going hard while the majority had decided to settle down too. After a few minutes, no one was on the move, causing the level to be enveloped by an eerie silence. Their eyes, previously scanning the desolate terrain for hidden dangers or paths forward, now fixated almost involuntarily on the massive pitch-black crack that marred the otherwise clear sky above. Time seemed to stretch on, the oppressive atmosphere weighing heavily on their spirits. The squads, scattered across the darkened land, remained motionless, a collective sense of tension and dread binding them together. Their senses were heightened to the extreme, every rustle of the wind or shift in the fog sending ripples of tension through the ranks. Just as the tension reached its peak, with more than half an hour having passed in this unsettling standstill, the black fissure in the sky began to shift. The fissure in the void widened slowly, almost unnoticeable at first. But then, the fissure suddenly expanded violently, revealing a massive, horrifying eye. Its iris was deep blood red, surrounding a pitch-black split that seemed to absorb all luminance and hope. The eye was impossibly large, and as it turned slowly, it cast a sinister red hue across the 100th floor, giving the whole terrain an eerie glow. The red luminance illuminated the twisted shapes of dead trees and the mournful outlines of mountains, casting shadows that contorted into hideous forms. This terrifying sight caused everyone to remain frozen in fear, not daring to even move an inch from their positions. That's because movement was equal to instant death. I would have never expected to play a deadly version of the children's game, red light, green light, after ascending to a Unigen. Felix chuckled in derision as he used his senses to gaze into the supermassive menacing eye. 1739 The 100th floor too. Remember, the all-seeing eye is sensitive to the fairest disturbances. Commander BIA warned with a cold tone, while I am sure none of you have any trouble with remaining in one posture, the same can't be said about being forced to move. This was the reason every squad had to build a stronghold with countless fortifications. The all-seeing eye was one of the echoing tower's unknown mysteries. Many attempts to breach past the 100th floor ended up in failure in the past. That's because there were 3 challenges against each squad. Avoiding the all-seeing eye's gaze, the other team's sabotaging attempts, and lastly, locating the entrance to the next floor. In the previous floors, everyone was chummy with each other since there were no indirect methods to get rid of their competition. In other words, any squad that made a direct assault against another without provocation would give the rest a valid motive to switch on them and get rid of them first. But here? In this desolate and gloomy landscape? With a weapon above their heads that never missed, everyone would have thoughts to eliminate their nearest opponents. That's exactly what the Chaoxians had in mind before even stepping into the tower. In the unsettling red glow cast by the massive eye in the sky, Prince Malakar and his Chaoxians were spread out across the eerie landscape. Unlike the other squads, they were hiding in the open, their eyes reflecting a sinister predatory glimmer. Prince Malakar reached out to his followers through a telepathic link unique to their kind. Make your move on your targets. We have to reduce the number of those leeches by at least 50% before we enter the next floor. He ordered coldly, not an ounce of calmness from before was seen in his eyes. It was like he was a different person. Among the Chaoxians, Samalan responded first with a faint murderous grin, "My prince, the Vibrungzian squad is within my radar. They are unaware of my presence." Prince Malakar's response was swift and devoid of hesitation. "Eliminate them. By your will, my prince. They will not see me coming." Knowing that the Vibronixians weren't an easy opponent to handle, Samalan didn't rush his ambush, thinking carefully about his strategy. Their fortifications are top-notch. I only have one chance to create a disturbance before getting spotted with their vibrational network. Samalan thought to himself as he gazed at the massive pitch-black dome of darkness around their stronghold. He was currently using his chaotic manipulation to turn into a perfect tree in the forest, which made it impossible to spot him since everything about him matched a normal tree. Chaos, in its essence, held within it the infinite potential for all forms and states of existence. By tapping into this vast reservoir of possibilities, Samalan could reshape the fabric of his being into a tree or any other life form as long as he could handle the transformation. The rest of the Chaoxians also disguised themselves as trees, boulders, and whatnot. While Samalan was contemplating his hardest on his next move, one of his teammates was already kicking off the rise of the chaos. Hyrus focused his gaze on the Gleamkin squad's stronghold. The Gleamkin, known for their mastery over light and darkness, had trouble building a stronghold from scratch like the Vibrungsians. Instead, they took advantage of their speed and searched for a cave carved into the side of a mountain. They fortified themselves in it with a massive boulder sealing the entrance. Meanwhile, the area around it was bathed in a blinding light so intense it deterred anyone with bad intentions. Hyrus had watched all of this happening right before his eyes since he had arrived here first and hid himself near the cave, knowing that any squad that found it wouldn't let it go. This should do the trick. With a single thought, Hyrus willed the solid matter to transform, to betray its nature, and become a relentless, advancing flood of a gooey, cement-like fluid. As the boulder and the ground liquefied, the once solid barrier began to seep into the cave, the fluid morphing into an unstoppable tide that sought to engulf everything in its path. Rumble rumble! Oh no! We are being attacked! Inside the cave, panic took hold as the Gleamkin squad caught sight of the approaching disaster. Their expressions turned to horror at the realization that the disturbances were too powerful and if they reached them, their lives would be over. As expected, the sensitive all-seeing eye turned its gaze upon the mountain, its singular horrifying slit enlarged a little. The squad leader, recognizing the direness of their situation, made a desperate decision. He fired a beam of light from his eyes at the approaching cement-like fluid, wanting to solidify it as quickly as possible. Since he couldn't speak psychically with his people as this wasn't a skill set everyone possessed in the quantum realm, he had to make the first move, believing that his male teammates would follow suit. Damn it! Damn it! Beams of pure, radiant energy shot forth from their eyes, converging on the advancing fluid. Alas, the all-seeing eye, with its slit already positioned over the cave, ended up more attracted to the emerging new disturbance. The ominous cloud cover parted as the all-seeing eye unleashed a sudden concentrated beam of green light toward the cave. The beam was a force of absolute precision and destruction, cutting through the air, a line of fiery green against the gloomy red background of the 100th floor. It pierced the mountain with surgical accuracy, creating a perfectly sized hole that traversed the entire structure uninterrupted. The light, unstoppable and indifferent to the materials it encountered, found its target in the cave and everything within it. No! The Gleamkin, caught in the act of defense, had no time to react before the green light enveloped them and the advancing flood, erasing their being in an instant. There were no screams, no sounds of struggle, just the eerie silence that followed the light's retraction. The all-seeing eye blinked once and the beam was retracted, leaving behind a forever altered landscape. Where once stood a mountain with a cave sheltering the Gleamkin squad, there was now only a massive, long hole that ran from the top of the mountain to its base. Horrifying as ever. Although Hyrus was hiding a decent distance from the contact area, he still felt his heart engulfed in a wave of inherited fear, like that beam was the absolute enemy of his existence. This feeling was shared by everyone who managed to witness the all-seeing eye making its move. I wonder who ended up dead? Scylla asked psychically with a hint of dread in her voice. How can you assume that someone has died 100%? Felix frowned. He watched as the beam got fired, but it didn't raise a single ounce of alarm for his safety. It was like his gut feeling wasn't scared of the beam landing on him. This was surprising considering that everyone was scared shitless from the all-seeing eye. We are sure because the green beam is believed to be created out of anti-quantum energy. Commander BIA cleared his doubts with a solemn tone, since all matter in our realm is made out of quantum energy, nothing and no one can survive this beam. 1740 The 100th floor. 3. How sure are you about this? Felix doubled down with a hint of surprise in his voice. In his mind, if what she said was true, then he had nothing to fear from the beam. While he was somewhat certain that the beam might be created of that bizarre anti-quantum energy due to his gut feelings being insensitive to it, he still had to make sure. All we know is that the beam never failed in obliterating anything it touched. Commander BIA added, thus, we can only theorize that it's anti-quantum energy. Commander BIA also wanted to confirm the theory since it would ensure her safety on the 100th floor and give her more freedom to do as she pleased. But, she didn't dare attempt to confirm it on her own skin while the others weren't considered helpful in this matter. However, it soon dawned on her that she was traveling with two potentially surface dwellers, who had no relation to the quantum realm like her. Should I experiment with one of them? Commander BIA thought about it briefly before shaking her head. The beam doesn't discriminate, and if I went for it, they have to be away from the squad. Additionally, she understood that if it didn't work against them, this would expose their identities, and she had no desire to make enemies with two Unigens, who were being chased by her most loathed being in the universe. It's best I remain chummy with them until that plague catches up. Commander BIA coldly narrowed her eyes. I will need any help I can get. The current state between Felix and Commander BIA was quite weird. Both of them sought each other's assistance against a mutual enemy. However, none of them dared to bring this matter up front as it meant exposing their identities to each other. Without a mutual link to establish a sense of trust, the status quo would remain as such. Meanwhile, Felix and Apollo were discussing telepathically how to move forward with this new piece of information. What do you think? Should we test out the theory? Felix asked. With what? In the next daylight cycle, I will use my blood-bending abilities to create a clone and send it away. When the night cycle comes, I will get it beamed out by the eye. Felix replied. Sounds good enough, but it will be difficult to pull it off with so many eyes on us. Apollo added. We are bound to get attacked or attack another team. We will make our move during the chaos. What's next if we succeed? Apollo questioned the real question. We won't have any use for the team. Felix smiled coldly. Besides Commander BIA, the rest will be too scared to make a move during the night cycle. This will give us complete ownership over the floor. In other words, they wouldn't need to remain Loki anymore and could use the all-seeing eye as a weapon to obtain the map and eliminate as many squads as possible before entering the next floors. He wouldn't be the paragon of sins if he gave a sh*t about the lives of some strangers in a foreign realm. It's a PL. Rumble. Rumble. Before Apollo could finish his sentence, the solid ground beneath the stronghold suddenly commenced to shudder and liquefy, the earth morphing into a dark, viscous substance. In moments, what was once firm ground transformed into a vast swamp with a facade deceptively calm but with a deadly intent. The transformation was so sudden, so unexpected, that the Vibrungsians barely had time to react. It's the doing of a Chaoxian. Mother ****. They must have hidden around the place before we arrived. We are making too much of a disturbance. The all-seeing eye is on to us. Panic ensued as the entire squad commenced to sink into the newly formed swamp, their movements becoming sluggish as the swamp fought to claim them. It was extremely easy for them to escape from the swamp, but this would force them to make an active movement. The all-seeing eye was more responsive to such movements than to the environmental ones. That's why the Gleamkin refused to budge even when the flood was approaching them, knowing that a single movement from them would cause the menacing eye to fire at them. No one knew why exactly, but that's how it was in the 100th floor and they would be foolish not to respect it. Amid the chaos, Samelin watched from a safe distance with a wide grin, the sight of the struggling Vibrungsians, ensnared by his trap, brought a sinister satisfaction. When he gazed above and noticed that the all-seeing eye had its horrifying slit concentrated on the sinking stronghold, his satisfaction only grew. With the all-seeing eye's ominous gaze fixed upon them, Commander Bia and her royal guard knew they needed a diversion to shift that merciless focus away from them and buy themselves precious time. Quickly offset the focus as practiced. Commander Bia barked loudly as she connected her mind to the massive vibrational grid around them. Without a word, the royal guards sprang into action and channeled their focus on a small desolate hill, unremarkable in the landscape of the echoing tower's 100th floor, but strategically located tens of kilometers away from their current position. Get ready to ditch the place. Apollo warned Felix, having no interest in placing his faith in his squad even when he knew what they planned against ambushes. No need, it seems like their strategy is going to work. Felix replied as he merged his senses with the vibrational network. He saw how the royal guards had unleashed a concentrated wave of energy, directing it like a spear through the ground toward the unsuspecting hill. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Rumble! Rumble! The earth commenced to tremble, at first a mere vibration but quickly escalating into a powerful quake that radiated outward from the hill's base. The ground beneath the hill shuddered as if in agony, the vibrations finding faults and weaknesses in the rock. Boredom! And then, with a roar that echoed across the desolate landscape, the hill cracked open. The ground split, tearing apart in a display of raw power, creating a chasm where once there had been solid earth. Dust and debris filled the air, a cloud of destruction visible even from kilometers away. The massive disturbance, exactly as Commander Bia had hoped, attracted the all-seeing eye's attention. Its dreadful gaze that was preparing its beam against the stronghold suddenly shifted to the hill, drawn by the earthquake's scale and the landscape's rupture. As the beam struck, the area around the hill was bathed in an otherworldly green light, illuminating the chasm and the shattered remnants of what had been. Reinforce the ground. I will seek out the culprit. Commander Bia ordered with great intensity. Duncan and the rest of the royal guards moved as one gear and started using their quantum energy manipulation to change the structure from a swamp into a solid again, giving them well-needed stability. Meanwhile, Commander Bia extended her senses through the vibrational network and swiftly found out the source of the ambush. It appeared as a disharmony in the frequencies within a forest of consistently, standing out akin to a sore thumb for those skilled enough. Found you, you rat! She uttered coldly as she prepared her retaliation, having no intentions of letting him go. 1741 The 100th floor. 4. *T. *T. I didn't expect them to react before the eye fired its beam. Meanwhile, Samalin's expression had gotten ugly at the sight of the stronghold returning its stability while the all-seeing eye had fired at an irrelevant target. I need to dip quickly. Knowing that his location must have been compromised, Samalin attempted to take advantage of the all-seeing eye's lack of focus and change his location. Alas, he was a bit too late. With a focused expression, Commander Bia gathered her vibrational energy, channeling it deep into the earth beneath Samalin's position. Rumble rumble! The earth trembled violently, the tremors focused directly under Samalin, who felt the ground begin to betray him. What had been solid a moment before now turned against him, opening up into a gaping sinkhole with an insatiable appetite. Crap! Guys! I need help! Samalin shouted for assistance from his squad, hoping that they would tap into their powers to create a much stronger disturbance. Leave it to me! Another Chaoxian immediately made his move against his exposed targets, hurling at them with a massive chaotic burst of energy that would turn anything into a peculiar material upon contact. Alas, his chosen targets were chrono walkers. Freeze the time! Tempus Vey ordered calmly, his voice resounding in his teammates' ears without his lips moving. The chrono walkers gazed at the incoming chaotic burst of energy and with a single flash of light, the burst of energy remained suspended in midair. However, the Chaoxian seemed prepared against this and enhanced the chaoticness of the sphere, causing it to affect even the time around it. The chaotic projectile escaped from the time constraints and started moving slower, faster, and sometimes even freezing. Walk out! Tempus Fay realized that it would be impossible to stop the chaotic sphere from landing on them since chaos affected all matter and concepts alike. Thus, when he noticed that the all-seeing eye's focus was somewhere else, he took a single step forward through time with his squad. The instant they did this, the horrifying slit turned to them and fired its green beam at their location. However, they were already gone, appearing in another location, making it seem like they had committed an instant teleport. But, in reality, they literally walked on the string of time for a brief moment. When they did this, the entire quantum realm got suspended in time in their eyes but not for the others. In simpler terms, they walked to a future where their locations were in a different place, hence the name, Chrono Walkers. We have to lay low for the next cycle. Tempus Fay said with an irritated tone as he gazed at the dimmed inscriptions on his skin. While the Chronowalkers' time abilities were powerful and unique, they came with a steep price, making it impossible for them to walk through time for more than a few moments. F***ck. She isn't letting go of me. Meanwhile, Samalan was still in a tough situation even when the eye wasn't targeting him. He tried his best to ditch the place without removing his disguise since it would be considered an active movement, but Commander BIA wasn't letting go of her bite. She had strengthened her attacks and even received assistance from Dankin and the rest to make his life an absolute hell. All he could do was focus his chaotic energy to offset the vibrations by sending an equal force of vibrations. Alas, he was against multiple true controllers of vibrations. Each time he adapted to a frequency and tried to match it, they changed it up instantly. This caused the ground under him to keep being assaulted by a powerful earthquake until the trees near him were already uprooted. The intense disturbance finally caught the attention of the all-seeing eye again. The eye, indifferent to allegiances, saw only the source of the disruption, and in a blink, its massive, frightening iris focused on the Chaoxian now struggling within the sinkhole. Help me! Fear gripped Samalan as he bellowed for his squad to do something. Sadly, his teammates weren't against weaklings and most of their attempts ended up in failure due to the other squad's preparedness. Desperate to divert its lethal attention, Samalan attempted to channel his chaotic energy to create a disturbance in the Vibrungsian's stronghold again. Wishful thinking. Dankin scoffed in ridicule. Commander BIA and her royal guards had already anticipated Samalan's attempt at retribution. As Samalan's chaotic energy reached out, seeking to wreak havoc, it was met with an invisible barrier of vibrations, dissipating it harmlessly. That's what you get for being bold enough to target us alone. I guess it was a fluke before that the prince controlled his emotions, they are still as aggressive and idiotic as ever. Kakik, we were polite enough to dig him a grave. The royal guards watched with mocking looks as the eye's green beam activated, targeting the frightened Samalan within the sinkhole. With a horrified expression, Samalan shielded himself with a disorderly barrier. Alas, the beam pierced through the barrier without an ounce of resistance. Nuuu! His echoing shriek was the last thing heard in the area before the green beam retracted back to the eye, leaving behind not a single particle of Samalan's existence. The moment he was erased, Prince Malakar felt a sudden shift in the chaotic energy around him, a disruption that resonated with the loss of one of his own. How dare they? How dare they touch one of my people? For a moment, Prince Malakar's composure fractured, his expression was a storm of fury and vengeance. The idea of retaliating against the Vibrungsians, of unleashing the full might of his disorder upon them in retribution for Samalan's demise, surged to the forefront of his mind. This was a dangerous thought in his current situation since he was unable to move. If those disorderly thoughts were to ever gain control over him, he might do something foolish and target the Vibrungsians right now. But then, as swiftly as it had come, the tempest within him subsided. The marathon is just starting and there are plenty of chances to make them pay. He uttered coldly. He believed that such emotional control was his doing, but in reality, it was Eris offsetting those disorderly thoughts with the order. The possession is near completion, I just need to keep this idiot from not getting himself killed until then. She idea to herself while residing within his pitch-black subconsciousness. The reason she was taking so long was because she had implemented a part of her consciousness in others too. Her search strategy was more effective than Uranus, as she had kept jumping from one territory to another and planting her wisp seeds inside high-ranked natives. With her ability to manipulate the portal destinations, she was able to hit almost all major nations. At the moment, she had millions of wisps across the entire quantum realm. Understanding that Felix and Apollo sought to free the chains from him made her prioritize areas with accelerated time. The echoing tower was merely one of those places. In other words, landing in the same place as Felix and Apollo wasn't a matter of luck, but of skill and intelligence. I am gonna avenge him. Bastards! I will kill them all. Meanwhile, some of the Chaotians were unable to contain their rage. Their thoughts became a maelstrom of retribution, driving them to act against the very nature of the 100th floor. Don't! Before Prince Malakar could set them straight, two Chaotians had already broken their disguise and charged with bold and unrestrained movements toward the Vibrungsians. Their disorderly eyes were red with bloodthirst. In the blink of an eye, two beams were fired one after the other in a matter of a split second, extinguishing their existence and sending them to meet Samalan. Eris shook her head as she watched the beams retract back to the eye. Chaos without order is like an ocean without shores, endless, consuming, and directionless. She commentated, feeling somewhat sympathetic for a race to be born with such affinity. She knew that it was more of a punishment than a reward. 1742 The 100th floor. V. Hours flowed by akin to the desolate murky river within the 100th floor, and before long more than 10 squads had met their fate. This was a huge number considering that the teams were at the foothold of the floor and were still a distance away from the entrance. Fortunately, with so many beams fired in the past hours, the massive eye began to droop, its relentless surveillance finally showing signs of wear. With a slow, almost reluctant motion, the eye closed. The ominous red hue that had bathed the entire floor began to fade, lifting the oppressive atmosphere at last. Across the landscape, a collective sigh of relief swept through the ranks of squads, feeling like they had been given another chance at life. Let's get going, we need to cover as much distance as possible before the night cycle comes again. Commander BIA ordered with a stern tone. How about you show me the map and let me take you all to the entrance? Apollo suggested lazily, I guarantee we will arrive before the eye opens again. No. Commander BIA rejected his proposal without much of an explanation. But, she didn't have to. Felix and the other mercenaries understood that she wouldn't hand the map to anyone even if it meant making their journey harder. She wasn't stupid not to understand that Felix and Apollo were still hanging around them because of the map. As you wish. Apollo shrugged his shoulders carelessly while creating a dark cloud and riding on it with Felix. Then, they ditched the stronghold and kicked off their new journey, following Commander BIA up close. The eye won't open up again until a minimum of 5 minutes. Felix discussed with Apollo telepathically, this will make the squads more daring in their assaults. I am certain that if we meet another squad on the way, we will. Before Felix could finish his sentence, his eyes picked up an ongoing conflict over the horizon. When he zoomed in, he noticed that it was a fight between a squad of planktons and Nonite swarm. Prepare to engage, leave no one behind. Commander BIA ordered coldly as she rushed towards the battle. Although some of those squad leaders had greeted her and showed a friendly approach on the tower's roof, Commander BIA had no interest in showing mercy. It was already difficult enough to deal with the tower's challenges. She would be foolish to act nice and keep her competition alive. Captain, are you okay with this? Silas asked softly. It is what it is. Plix replied emotionlessly, we have already picked sides. As the only plankton in the squad, it was normal that he wouldn't feel right about murdering members of his race. The only reason he chose to join the Vibronyxians was because his race didn't accept foreign mercenaries, and this meant he would need to let go of his squad. Still, he didn't think too much of it since he believed that they would remain at the surface and search for treasures. If he knew this would turn into a race to the ground floor, he wouldn't have bothered to join in the first place. I will make my move during the chaos, cover for me. Felix shared. I gotcha. After getting closer to the battle scene, Felix and the others found out that the squad of planktons was struggling to fend off the attacks of the Nanites' swarm. It seems like they have already gained control over half of the plankton squad. F***ing parasites. Dankin spat on the ground in disgust at the sight of half of the planktons turning silver in color while their eyes seemed dead. The Nanites' swarm was a unique race that was feared and avoided at all costs. Unlike other races, they had no attunement to a quantum law. Instead, they possessed a central hive-like form, allowing each one to split into millions of wasp-like entities, each a tiny machine with a singular purpose: invade and control. If a single Nanite parasite managed to enter someone's brain, it gave them full dominance over their powers. Yet, their strongest traits were their toughness against the quantum laws and insane flexibility, allowing them to evade any attack by separating their forms. The only reason such a race hadn't already dominated the quantum realm was because they couldn't maintain the possession for a prolonged period. The host always ends up dead after some time. At the moment, the possessed planktons were using their spatial manipulation to keep up with the other planktons and help the rest of the Nanites succeed in their possession. Erect a repelling vibrational shield and keep your senses heightened. Commander BIA warned, if anyone got possessed, I wouldn't hesitate to eliminate him. Everyone nodded with a solemn expression as they watched the swarm advance while the planktons intensified their efforts, creating spirals of space that looped back on themselves, dead ends that appeared out of nowhere. But the Nanites divided further, reducing their size to slip through the smallest cracks in the plankton's spatial defenses, exploiting every momentary lapse in concentration, every slight opening. Let me handle it, Commander. Dankin uttered with a confident smirk, it's been a while since I went all out. Don't mess up. Commander BIA permitted. Without an ounce of hesitation, Dankin phased into the heart of the battlefield, causing both parties to momentarily cease their movements, as all eyes and senses turned towards him. The moment they recognized him and saw the sinister smile painting his lips, chills coursed down. Retreat. Pull away. The head of the Nanites swarm, Virona, ordered through their hive network while using the plankton he possessed to teleport away some of his squad mates. Alas, because they were too spread out, he couldn't get everyone away before Dankin made his move. With a deep breath, he pulled back his arm, his fist becoming a nexus of concentrated energy, then, with a motion that blurred the lines between speed and stillness, he unleashed his attack. His fist struck the fabric of reality itself, a powerful space-time punch that sent ripples through the dimensions. The impact fractured space-time akin to a mirror shattering, creating cracks that spider-webbed across the battlefield. These were not mere visual effects but deep ruptures in the very heart of the tower's floor, through which nothing could survive. Rumble. A massive shockwave erupted from the point of impact, unleashing a surge of destructive energy that annihilated everything in its path. Erg. My. Spatial barrier. The battlefield was transformed into a zone of devastation, the shockwave tearing through both planktons and Nanites with indiscriminate fury. Since the punch targeted the space-time of the battlefield, barriers and such were utterly useless against it. After all, if not even the space-time could survive the punch, how could anyone within it survive it? Thus, all who failed to exit the destruction zone in time were utterly erased while the rest were gone. As Dankin surveyed the destruction he had wrought, his grin remained, unbothered by the devastation surrounding him. See, we had nothing to worry about. Who can stand against the Vibronixians? Dankin uttered with a faint cold grin after returning to his squad. He uttered the last part while gazing at Felix, seemingly telling him that if they had a rematch, his fate would be the same as those poor Nanites and planktons. Felix ignored him completely as his mind was focused on guiding a blob of green blood left behind under a dead tree's bark. I have deployed the clone. Felix shared, it seems like no one noticed. How could they? Apollo chuckled, the F*er shattered hundreds of kilometers of surface area. Indeed, no one's eyes were on Felix with such a grandiose display by Dankin. Not even Commander BIA picked up on his action as both of them used the necessary steps to conceal the small blood blob. Now, we wait for the next cycle and hope for the best. Felix smiled sinisterly as he gazed at the crack in the sky. If the theory was proven correct, I have much more in mind than just to rule the floor. 1743 The 100th floor. 6. As Felix's true feelings were made clear, a faint shudder occurred at the pitch-black crack, causing some of the highly sensitive beings on the floor to pick up on it. Eris was one of them. Something is about to happen in the next cycle and it doesn't bode well for me, she thought to herself with a stern expression. Meanwhile, the others ignored the sign and continued rushing towards the entrance, using the map's details to their advantage. If it wasn't for the map, they would be forced to search the entire floor randomly while the all-seeing eye was threatening them constantly. In the past attempts to breach the tower, some squads were stuck on the 100th floor for years before finding a portal. The worst part? The portal led to an unknown destination, as it could be the entrance to the next floor or one way to their damnation. With the map at hand, everyone was able to speedrun the floor as long as the others didn't pull the rug from underneath them. Shortly after, the squads began to prepare for the next round of the night cycle. Some of them greed for more distance while some were moving at a snail's pace, wanting to clear the floor without casualties. Meanwhile, Prince Malakar had asked for his party to group up again after losing 3 members at once, a difficult-to-stomach blow to their strength. He didn't want to lose most of his squad while there were still 100 floors more to climb down. As for Commander BIA and her squad, they continued to play it safe. They set up a new similar stronghold in a desolate forest with long trees that had no branches in sight. After they were done, more than half an hour passed before the all-seeing eye slowly and deliberately resumed its watchful vigil, causing the crimson hue that had previously bathed the landscape in an ominous glow to return. It's time. Felix narrowed his eyes in focus as he leaned against the stronghold wall in a frozen posture. He released his senses and soon enough, they got linked to the blob of blood in nowhere. Then, he ordered it to morph into a humanoid, faceless being. While its transformation was happening, the menacing eye swiftly gazed at it. With sudden, exaggerated movements, the humanoid blob started to dance wildly under Felix's control. A split second later, a green beam was fired at it indiscriminately as the eye didn't care if it was a real creature or not. It's a hit, Felix shared with Apollo. And? Apollo inquired. Felix went silent for a moment before a diabolical smile took hold of his real face, causing those who saw it to feel goosebumps coursing through their skin. Just as it appeared, it soon disappeared, leaving them doubting their eyes as they knew that no one would be stupid enough to even twitch under the eye of judgment. Meanwhile, Felix's eyes reflected the landscape around the blob being erased, reduced to nothingness, yet the humanoid blob floated unscathed. It was like it got hit by a ray of soothing light instead of an all-destroying beam. It's confirmed, this place is our haven. Felix forwarded the news to Apollo with a faint smirk. Ha ha ha, so it's fine if I scratch my ass? It's been eating me for a while. Apollo chuckled. Don't move, Felix said, let me try something. Felix gazed at the roof above and called telepathically, his tone devoid of any formalities, Commander BIA, or should I call you, Primogenitor BIA? Hey! You! For a moment, Commander BIA was left stunned, feeling like she was struck by a lightning bolt out of the blue. The last thing she expected from this peculiar situation standoff was for Felix to drop the facade on his own and even recognize her true identity. How? Why? Commander BIA finally responded, her voice steady, betraying no sign of the unrest that Felix's words might have stirred within her. The first question was understood by Felix, but the second one confused him. Asking for how he recognized her identity was one thing, but to ask about the why? It implied that she knew more than she was showing. What do you mean by why? Don't bother lying to me, I can't be lied to. Felix asked coldly, not having a good feeling about this. Commander BIA felt her heart grow colder as she realized that she made a mistake and exposed the fact that she understood about their identities. With the information provided to her about Felix, she knew that he wasn't bullshitting her, as no one could lie to the paragon of sins unless it was done by another paragon. Commander BIA took a deep breath through her nose and decided to be truthful, understanding that the situation had already gotten out of her control the moment Felix exposed her identity. I don't know how you found out about my identity and why you decided to expose your identities at such a bizarre moment. But, what I do know is that you are being hunted by Uranus and he is currently on the way to the tower as we speak. The moment Felix heard this, he felt his heart sink to the bottom of his stomach in dread. The only reason he was being this bold in the tower was because he understood that the entrance was going to close soon and this would mean none of his chase would be a threat to them anymore. Now, to find out that Uranus was on his way implied that someone had tipped him off. It didn't take a genius to recognize the culprit. What have you done? Felix uttered with a suppressed murderous tone. He reached out to her at the start in hopes of obtaining the map and her assistance when possible, since he knew that she would be the only one unaffected by the beam as well. So, he might as well recruit her in their journey and get rid of the others. Since both of them were considered as mortals in the eyes of the Unigens before Felix's ascension, he believed there was a big chance of relating to her and winning her over. But now? She was the first on his death list. I am sorry, but I had to. Commander BIA offered coldly, I have no idea why is he chasing you, but your conflict has brought him to me, leaving me no choice but to use you as bait to bring him to the tower and kill him. You, kill him? Felix frowned, what kind of history do you have with him? Does it have any relation with your disappearance? He could pick up the truth from her voice, which made him puzzled about the situation. No one seemed to know why Commander BIA had ditched the matter universe, but with that monster being involved, he started to see a part of the picture. I don't want to talk or see those memories. Commander BIA showed a deadpan expression as she offered, if you want, you can see for yourself. Knowing that he was a Unigen made her understand that he could invade her memories quite easily. Felix had no interest in being a gentleman when confronted with a likely spy sent by his hunters. So, without an ounce of hesitation, he sent a wisp of his consciousness and invaded her consciousness space. After a quick glance over her past, he retracted his invasive senses and was left with a puzzled expression. Even the others who witnessed BIA's past had their words stuck in their throats. 1744 The 100th floor. 7. I just came to realize that we had it quite nice. Thor murmured, feeling like his fate as a primogenitor was a million times better than what Commander BIA had to go through. The memories had shown them that BIA had been kidnapped by Uranus on a whim for the sake of fulfilling an experiment. He brought her to the Eternal Kingdom and married her, but in reality, he put her through all known and unknown forms of abuse for the sake of one goal, birthing a child. A child born out of a Unigen and a primogenitor sharing the same traits. Yet, after millions of years of all kinds of unspeakable actions done to BIA, she had failed to get impregnated. With each failure, the abuse got worse for BIA due to Uranus irritation building up. In the end, she managed to escape to the quantum realm after Uranus had lost complete faith in the experiment. In reality, Uranus allowed her to run away after his interest died out. What he did to her is unforgivable, but we will be considered as hypocrites if we were to denounce his actions. Lady Sphinx remarked with an emotionless tone, I have done much worse to mortals for the sake of discovering the truths of the universe. Just like we perceive mortals as nothing but walking sheep, the Unigens possess the same perception over us. Lady Sphinx understood that BIA was simply on the other side of the fence. A victim in the hands of a much more powerful being. While she would never approve of such despicable actions, she understood that life wasn't fair. The strong eat the weak. It was just that the primogenitors didn't feel good to see with their own eyes appear being treated as a subject in an experiment, which made them feel frail and abused. A feeling all mortals had gone through during the primogenitor's reign. But, none of them bothered to give it two thoughts since mortal life was as cheap as a piece of rock on the sideline in their eyes. After all, just think. How could the universe get this populated with millions of different species descending from primogenitors if there wasn't some kind foul play? Even if the primogenitors didn't force themselves upon others, how could a mortal even reject their advances? We might not have the right to denounce his actions without sounding hypocritical, but it doesn't stop me from doing it. Thor said coldly, we were pieces of sh*t for those below us and he is one too. Also, we didn't do any kind of those twisted and sick actions to impregnate our wives forcefully. Ramongandra supported with a solemn expression, we merely followed our strong instincts to spread our seeds before our intelligence had matured. On the other hand, he has done it as an experiment and put her through hell even when the results were clear from the start. The rest of the tenants nodded in agreement. They may not be squeaky clean and had their own fair share of evil deeds and misgivings, but still, they refused to get lumped up in the same breath as that horrendous beast. He was on a different level entirely. Felix left them to argue among themselves about this moral dilemma and reached out to the silent Commander Bia. I am sorry you had to go through that. However, before he could finish his sentence, she interrupted him. I didn't show you my past to harvest sympathy, it's long overdue. Commander Bia said with a deadpan expression, but a hint of hatred and weakness born out of her vulnerability couldn't escape reflecting from her pupils. Felix knew that she was referring to the notion she entered the quantum realm alone with trauma as massive as a mountain over her shoulders. The worst part, she had no one to talk to about it since she had to keep her identity hidden. If only she knew that Felix said this to be polite, as his heart could no longer feel such emotions for anyone besides Asna and very loved ones. But, he didn't want to add salt to injury, as her past was something he wouldn't wish upon his worst enemies. The trauma of being treated as a sex doll and possessing zero power to retaliate or stop it was shared by many unfortunate souls across the universe. For it to happen to even a primogenitor meant that no one was safe unless they obtained absolute strength. May I ask why Uranus wanted a child? Felix inquired. He didn't want to be insensitive, but at the same time, he was in a situation where he needed all sorts of information about his hunters. To keep him company, he said. Commander Bia replied, her eyes affixed into the distance, Unigens have tried to give birth to children before and failed with each other. He believed it was because the universe performed not allow such a chaotic child to be born. So, he tried to make it happen with me, believing that my lower status and matching laws would make a difference. Felix wasn't surprised by the notion of two Unigens having no ability to birth children. Unigens were born out of the universe's heart as a core, there was no way a Unigen would be born out of two even if they created perfect reproduction systems. The universe wouldn't allow it, as it went against all of its orders and settings. Though, he was somewhat surprised it also failed with a Unigen and a primogenitor. This means I can never have a child of my own, whether it was with Isna or another. Felix murmured in his mind. He always had his misgivings about having children with Isna, since both of them were currently too high up in the food chain to have a child that wouldn't bring the universe to its knees. But to know that he could never have it was a different blow, as it had cut off his hopes entirely. Fortunately, he wasn't in the right situation to mule over fatherhood, since his life was at stake, and his loved one was captured. He swiftly threw the matter at the back of his head and fired a series of questions with a serious tone. When performed, you tell him about us. How were you planning to kill him in the tower? Does he also possess the map? I told him right before I entered the tower. With the time difference being somewhat on our side, he should be still on the way to the tower. He doesn't have a map, which is one of the reasons I dared to bait him here. Commander Bia uttered coldly, as long as we keep going down, he will be forced to keep chasing us. I am counting on the tower's challenges to get rid of him or keep him imprisoned. The plan sounded good on paper, but if Felix was able to move without killing everyone, he would have facepalmed in frustration. Uranus had already entered the tower, reached the first floor, and succeeded in leaving it in one piece. Although it wasn't a smooth journey for him, he had done it before and had no problems with doing it again. The worst part? Felix knew that he would be bringing with him Eris and the rest. He still had no clue who was sent with him, but he was sure about Eris and Uranus being involved. If it was just Uranus he might have a tingle of faith in her plan, but with Eris' involvement, he didn't bother to entertain the thought. In a tower where reality made absolutely no sense and chaos thrived, she could be uttered to be walking in her backyard. Right now, those two are coming for us. Do I seek out the earliest exit and get the F***ck out while I still can? Felix was thrown off by this new development and recognized that he had to rethink his next steps. If only he knew that Eris was already inside and had him on his radar, the decision to take a dip would be the easiest one to make. You have been awfully quiet. Apollo suddenly interjected lazily, did you succeed? It has gotten more complicated than it is. With a deep sigh, Felix updated him on everything discussed and even shared with him some backstory between BIA and Uranus. She is his ex-wife. Why am I hearing this for the first time? Apollo was left more surprised by this piece of news than the fact Uranus was on his way here. He made sure to hide her existence and the experiment from the Unigen's eyes, knowing that he would be judged. Felix said. He didn't come up with us on his own. He had witnessed how Uranus was keeping BIA imprisoned in his mansion while using his spiritual pressure to cover her existence. While there were monsters amidst Unigens, there were also softies. Artemis was one of them and would have not remained quiet if she had found out about it. What do you think? Felix sought his opinion. Do we stick with our plan and keep going to the bottom while using the map to our advantage, or ditch this place at the first opportunity? 1745 The 100th floor. 8. Our identities are already exposed, which means, if we leave the tower without fulfilling our goal, we will have to create new ones. That's quite difficult since we can't reside in the Vibronix Empire anymore. Apollo sighed in sadness, not welcoming to the idea of losing his identity and being turned homeless. He had invested quite a lot in his identity. He understood that it would be near impossible to escape Uranus and Eris radars if they remained in the Vibronix Empire. Even if Zephyr wanted to hook them up with new identities, Uranus would visit him again and extract the information from him. With their identities being exposed, it wasn't hard to track them back to the brothel. All in all, the Vibronix Empire was out of the picture, and without legit identities, they wouldn't be able to hide in plain sight within other nations. This is the least of our worries. Felix frowned. If we lost this opportunity to get rid of the chains, we might not find another. Uranus has made it clear that it's fairly possible to track us down unless we hide somewhere desolate. If push came to shove, Felix wouldn't mind sticking his head under the sand in a random place. However, this would mean that he would be forced to meet Apollo's dark side without his full strength. He truly wanted to avoid it. Get the map from her first and let's check the exit points and the floors with accelerated time difference, we can make a decision then. Apollo suggested. Felix took upon his suggestion and returned to his conversation with Commander BIA. It's clear that our goals align and it will be foolish of us not to combine forces. Felix shared with a serious tone, but to earn your trust, I think it's only fair I show you why we will never be on Uranus' side. Felix sent some pieces of his memories showing his alterations within the Eternal Kingdom and the final battle that led him to this sticky situation. He also showed her some bits about his origin to make her understand that he came from humble roots and had nothing to do with Unigens, knowing that it was near impossible for BIA to trust a Unigen ever again. Upon watching those memories, Commander BIA's expression transformed into one of shock and awe, her eyes widening with respect and familiarity. The revelation of his past, the struggles he had faced, and the battles he had won against seemingly insurmountable odds, cast him in a new light in her eyes. Although Felix had shown her not even 1% of his struggles, they were enough to make her relate to him on a personal level. Your journey, it's nothing short of unprecedented, to have faced the Unigens and the rulers, to have emerged not just unscathed but victorious in your own right. I had no idea how a mortal born out of a common species gets to slay Unigens and rival even the three rulers. She commentated with a tint of reverence in her eyes, seemingly seeing an actual hero in the flesh. It seems like you possess won her over. Thor said. It's normal for her to act this way as Felix did what she was dreaming of doing. Elder Kraken smiled bitterly, he has shown her that even gods can be slain. It was true. Commander BIA was holding on to her emotions for far too long, and it was about time she received a slimmer of hope for her cause. But wait, if you were this strong, why are you running away from Uranus? I think both of you can handle him. Commander BIA inquired. Going against the third ruler came with a steep cost. Felix shared, I am currently weakened immensely and I have entered the tower to seek a place with a significant time difference to get back my strength. If you possess any useful information about this, it will be appreciated. Felix added. I see. Commander BIA narrowed her eyes in focus for a moment before disclosing, if you are seeking accelerated time, then, the clockwork floor is the one to target. The clockwork floor. Felix raised an eyebrow, what floor is it and what does it do? It's a giant, intricate mechanism where the floor itself is made of moving gears and cogs. Everyone must navigate the constantly shifting mechanical maze, solving puzzles that require us to manipulate time within localized areas to progress toward the exit or unlock secrets and treasures. It is the 20th floor though, which means, reaching it will be a challenge on its own. However, if you make it there safely, you can even manipulate your own bodily and spiritual perception of time, allowing your body to experience millions of years in matters of minutes without going through the actual years. Commander BIA added, for mortals, this is a death sentence, but for immortals like us, it can be manipulated to our advantage. After she finished her explanation, Felix and the tenants were left with looks of surprise and exhilaration. This is it. Felix took a deep breath to calm his emotions, this is my only way to unshackle those cursed chains with minimum suffering. Hold on a second, how can it be possible to experience millions of years in matters of minutes without consciously living it? Lord Shiva frowned, it sounds too unrealistic. If it was in any other place, I would possess doubted its validity. Felix replied with an optimistic tone, but, this is the echoing tower, and it's on the 20th floor. I don't know if it truly will work, but if there is a place where the impossible turns into possible, this will be it. Even if it wasn't possible, just the notion of being able to manipulate the laws of time in your area without the universe's intervention will help you achieve your goal. Lady Sphinx added, you can always slumber through the millions of years until the punishment duration ends. That's true too. While it wouldn't be as good as the first option, Felix wasn't in a position to complain. But soon, he realized that the legitimacy of the information must be questioned since no single had ever reached the 20th floor before. Even the Unigens had only seen up to 10 floors and were clueless about the ones above which were built after their time. Is your source of information the map? He asked. Yes, the map has great details of every floor even down to the ground floor. Commander BIA offered, I will hand you a deciphered version in the daylight cycle. Although she didn't trust Felix 100%, even after he showed her some of his memories, she had to depict goodwill by making active supportive moves. Whether handing out the map would backfire on her later on or not, she had to hand it to them willingly to keep this new fragile alliance intact. Felix accepted her goodwill and thanked her in advance. If they were on a surface level, he wouldn't bother to deliver her into his team even if they wanted the same thing. However, in the quantum realm and especially the echoing tower, the lines between a native and a Unigen blurred significantly. If she was able to keep just single Unigen busy if a battle were to happen, he would be more than satisfied. 1746 The 100th floor. 9. What are you guys chatting about? Apollo invaded their discussion with an annoyed tone, feeling neglected. Felix updated him on the situation and told him about his final decision. We will head to the 20th floor. He said with a cold smile, if we made it there and got rid of my chains, we can turn things around. Felix might not be too confident in being able to slay both Eris and Uranus, but if he caught them off guard with his newfound strength, there was a great possibility of success in taking down one of them. If he managed to obtain their core and ascend, it would be a different story entirely. But first, they had to get rid of the variables. BIA, we have already tested the theory of the all-seeing eye firing an anti-quantum energy beam. Felix shared, the results were positive, which means, we can get rid of the rest of the squads and have the tower to us alone. Is that true? Commander BIA was surprised, no wonder you decided to expose your identities. On this floor, we three can be considered invincible. Exactly, that's why I suggest we get rid of everyone and even the original map on the floor to make sure Uranus won't get his hands on it. Felix added. I agree. Commander BIA nodded in approval. Also, heads up, Uranus isn't the only Unigen after us. Felix shared with a faint cough. Hey! How many are there? I don't know, they can range from 2 to 6. You joking, right? Nope. Half an hour later. The night cycle was concluded with no casualties this time as most squads chilled out while the Chaoxians decided to group up and prioritize minimizing their losses. After the day cycle arrived, Felix, Apollo, and Commander BIA traded a single knowing glance between them before making their move. They had already crafted a neat plan to ensure everyone's elimination. Commander BIA ordered her squad to stay in their positions while she headed in a different direction. Meanwhile, Felix and Apollo also split up from the team and went different ways. What is she thinking? Duncan knitted his eyebrows in displeasure as he gazed at the silhouette of Felix and Apollo fading into the fog. Commander BIA hadn't told them about the new development as it was too complex for them to understand. They didn't even know about the existence of the matter universe and that the quantum realm existed in a dimension smaller than a particle. They didn't even know what a particle was. So, how could she explain to them her situation without sounding mad? Fortunately, no one could go against her commands regardless of their comfort. You don't think we got ditched, right? Kronos gulped a mouthful as he asked his leader. Don't be foolish. Plix replied calmly, just sit tight and wait. As long as we stay with the main squad, she can't leave us. Meanwhile, Felix could be seen sprinting to areas with the most number of squads while Apollo ignored all and targeted the exit. As for Commander BIA, she was heading towards a completely different location, aiming for the original map. Their movements had attracted the attention of the squads near them due to being alone, but they ignored them and continued on their way to the entrance. After some time, the squads began to slow their speed and prepare for the next night cycle, creating strongholds and whatever defensive formations to keep them safe. Since Apollo knew he wouldn't be harmed by the eye anymore, he didn't bother to stop, he kept on moving, surpassing other squads one by one until he was at the forefront of the race. In less than a minute, while the eye was still closed, he finally came to a halt before a giant mountain with a baby face smiling creepily on its surface. This is it. He recalled the details on the map given to him by Commander BIA, showing a picture of this very mountain and a small X mark on its creepy smile. He flew to the carved-in smile and the closer he got, the bigger it appeared. When he arrived, the smile was turned into a massive dark cave with a hint of light coming from its depth. With a quick check on the light, he returned to the entrance of the cave and sat down on the edge with a cold smile, awaiting anyone lucky enough to escape from Felix's grasp. What a great place to spectate the fireworks! He chuckled as he brought out his lyre, planning to match the upcoming performance with a noteworthy melody. Under the ghostly glow of the night cycle, with the all-seeing eye open and ever watchful, Felix was seen standing on the tip of a tall branchless tree gazing at the spread-out fortifications around him. With an emotionless expression, he launched himself into the air, propelling towards the eye as it targeted him with a concentrated beam of green light. Unfazed, Felix soared higher until the beam struck him directly. Yet, instead of the catastrophic damage one would expect, Felix felt a mild sensation, akin to being touched by the ray of a flashlight. His smile grew even colder as continued on his ascent unhindered, bathing under the green glow. The eye loomed larger with each passing moment, its vastness becoming more apparent as Felix approached. The instant he reached the eye, he realized it was a giant orb suspended in the void, its surface shifting with colors and bizarre inscriptions. "I have never seen those writings before," Felix murmured as he went to the eye's blind spot, causing it to cancel its beam and fire another one at Commander BIA, who had yet to arrive at the map location. Felix ignored this and continued studying the eye with a hint of intrigue clouding his visage. "Lilith. Don't ask me, I have no idea what it is or its origin." Lilith shrugged her shoulders lazily. "You don't even recognize those writings?" Felix stressed with a doubtful tone. He understood that the only languages used to manipulate the elements and laws were the three celestial languages. However, they had more control over elements than laws since laws were separated into existing and creating. The celestial languages could only manipulate existing laws, but could not create them from scratch as Unigens do. To find a new language was quite intriguing since it went against the universe's 5 pillars of its creation. "No need to overthink it," Lady Sphinx remarked, "it might be just scribbles that have no control over the eye." "It might, but there is only one way to truly find out." Felix stretched his arm at the side of the massive red iris and then started releasing crimson mist at it. Felix never planned to run around idiotically and eliminate squads in this manner when he could corrupt the all-seeing eye and make it his own demonic weapon. This thought came to him the instant he managed to corrupt quantum energy. It made him realize that in theory, he could corrupt everyone and anything in the quantum realm since their origin was quantum energy. Entities and objects within the echoing tower were no different. "If I succeed in this, Uranus is going to experience the dreadful time in his life chasing me." Felix smirked coldly. 1747 The 100th floor. X. As Felix bathed the all-seeing eye in his evil energy, its color began to shift, the normally clear and penetrating red hue turned into a deeper, more sinister shade. Veins of red and black snaked across its surface, giving it a vicious appearance that screamed of corruption and malice. Due to its massive size, the transformation took a short while, but after its completion, no one could remove Felix's pleased smirk from his face. He could feel the connection link between him and the corruption residing deep within the eye, allowing him to control it as he pleased. "I had some doubts about this since quantum realm creatures have no souls for evil energy to possess. But, it's great that it has worked," Candace remarked. While evil energy could corrupt almost anything as long as it wasn't resisted, having a soul played an important part. That's because if someone got demonized with a soul, it implied his permanent enslavement to Felix. Wendigo and Saurus knew it better than anyone, as even though Felix had left them behind after his ascension and rarely interacted with them anymore, he still had complete control over them regardless of distance. "It feels like it's a lifeless object. It doesn't even have a brain or a single thought roaming its mind," Felix disclosed with a curious tone as he studied the eye fully now that it was corrupted. "It's quite a unique entity," Lady Sphinx commentated. "It is more or less similar to flora or fungus, operating based on a singular evolutionary command. In its case, open its eyes, destroy any disturbance, and then seize a rest." Elder Kraken nodded. "That's all I wanted for it in the first place." Felix smiled coldly as he commanded it to halt firing the beam at Commander BIA. The moment it retracted its beam, Commander BIA stopped and gazed at the eye with a stunned expression. "He really did it," she murmured. She was already told that Felix was going to gain control over the all-seeing eye, but she didn't believe him. In her eyes, no one could gain control over the tower's assets. Before she could think too much about this, a sudden green beam was fired at a distance from her, then another and another and another. A series of precise beams kept lasering down the entire floor, deleting one squad after another. Felix had marked the majority of squads' positions on the floor earlier and was now using his finger to point at them one by one without an ounce of mercy. "What the hell is going on?" Monkiar exclaimed, his eyes screaming with confusion and dread. Who could blame him? He had just witnessed two close strongholds get obliterated without the faintest disturbance in the vicinity. Hey! How come everyone is active at once in this cycle? Prince Malakar knitted his eyebrows in doubt as he watched the menacing eye keep firing beams non-stop. "Something doesn't feel right, Prince," Hyrus interjected. The rest of their teammates nodded in support. They knew that most of the squads were pretty cowardly and all they wanted was to escape from the floor in one piece. Without them to create a mess, this cycle should have been peaceful just like the past one. It seems he finally decided to make his move. Meanwhile, Eris gazed at the menacing eye. Her spiritual senses might not be at their peak yet, but she was able to sense the demonic aura around the eye. It was a clear giveaway of Felix's involvement. "It seems I can't let the possession happen naturally anymore." With an unfazed expression at the rain of beams, that caused everyone to freeze in fear, she manifested the tome in her hands. Then, she flipped a single page, and the moment the paper edges connected, divine light pierced through the pages and exited Prince Malakar's eyes. Hyrus and the rest were startled by the sudden emergence of light from their prince, causing them to check on him. "Prince? Hey! Is something wrong?" However, he didn't respond to their calls as his existence was already erased by Eris the moment she flipped that page. She refused to do this before since it was going to affect her final strength even more when the possession ended, but she had to commit it after witnessing the ongoing massacre. She understood that it wouldn't be long before their turn arrived and whether they moved or remained in their place, they could not escape from Felix's judgment. This would in turn eliminate her vessel. Whoosh! With a sudden flash of light, Prince Malakar's form began to morph, softening and reshaping under Eris's hands. "Prince?" The Chaoxians watched, stunned into silence, as their prince's transformation continued. His body elongated, becoming more slender, more graceful. His hair, previously a wild mane, lightened, taking on a silver hue that flowed like liquid sunshine. But it was his face that held them captivated, a visage that was no longer his own, but that of a goddess none of them recognized. Who are you?" Hyrus stuttered as he watched the breathtaking Eris flip her silvery hair behind her back with an indifferent expression. At least, he managed to utter a question as the rest of the Chaoxians were left stunned speechless, having no idea how to process this situation. "Be quiet, and I might consider letting you live," Eris replied calmly as she gazed at the all-seeing eye slowing down its firing rate. She counted over 30 squads eliminated in under a minute, leaving fewer than 10 out of an original 50. Since each squad had more than 20 members at least, the death toll was already in the hundreds. Meanwhile, the Quarklings' leader Monkiar, the head of the Nanites swarm Virona, and Tempusve, the Chrono Walkers' commander, had ditched their strongholds and escaped towards the exit point at their fastest speed. "The eye has gone rogue. There are no more rules. Fly to the exit quickly." Virona screamed at what was left of his squad to continue moving non-stop. The rest of the survivors did the same after witnessing the destruction of their peers without them moving an inch. "What the F***ck is going on? How did this turn into mindless execution grounds?" Monkiar's frightened bellow could be heard echoing from a distance. The emotions packed within it were enough to explain everyone's current distressed state. "How is this possible? Is it related to Commander Bia?" Scylla said telepathically while watching the ongoing massacre with widened eyes. If they hadn't been ordered to not move from their location by her, they would have already chased after the other squads in fear. How can this be related to her? Plix wanted to hold his heart that was about to pop out of his chest in dread, but he remained affixed in his position. While it was evident that staying frozen wouldn't provide any protection, they were ordered to not move at all costs. It was for a good reason. As they were holding on to this false sense of safety, Felix's eyes were seen zooming in and out akin to an eagle, searching for the Chaoxians while putting the eye on automatic mode now that the majority were on the move. If his teammates ignored the orders and moved, he wouldn't care if the eye took them out too. The eye is showing signs of exhaustion, I have to get rid of the Chaoxians before the next cycle. Felix frowned deeply while trying his best to scan out the Chaoxians. Even though he owned the eye, he couldn't stop it from feeling exhausted. This implied another day cycle would occur, and he would rather avoid complications by dealing with them during the day cycle. Alas, their transformations within the environment were too perfect, it made them invisible even in his eyes. But, Felix still had some tricks up his sleeve. Let's see if this will work. Electricity suddenly crackled within Felix's eyes as he used his electromagnetism laws to scan out for any electrical signals on the floor. Sure enough, many tiny flashes of strings emerged spread out in his overextended senses. Those were electrical signals propagated like a wave to thousands of neurons, which leads to thought formation within the brains of everyone in here. While quantum natives had no soul, the same couldn't be said about their thought formation as it was more or less the same as the surface dwellers. In other words, it didn't matter if the Chaoxians turned into a tree or a rock, as long as their thought process was active, electrical signals would keep showing up. If he wanted, he could even use this method to read other people's minds by intercepting and deciphering those waves. It worked, hey! Before Felix could feel pleased with his method's success, his eyes widened to the limit while his heart felt like a miasma of horror clouded it. His reaction was understandable as his senses picked up on a massive blinding pillar of light amidst the darkness. It was like a sun attempting to hide among a bunch of flashlights. What a terrifying brain power, it's like a supercomputer being compared to a calculator. Lady Sphinx remarked with a stunned expression, even she couldn't believe what her eyes were feeding her. Felix even gazed at the light produced by his brain and it wasn't even a third of the brilliant massive pillar. While it might be a sign of intelligence difference, it mostly showcased the activeness of the brain being in different realms. Oh boy, you are in a big trouble. Lilith suddenly interjected with a serious tone, there is only one person who can match the three rulers' thought processes and it seems like she decided to pay you a visit. Felix felt chills course down his spine after realizing the horrifying truth behind her words. You can't be talking about ER. Just as he was about to ask for confirmation, a familiar voice resounded crystal clear in his ears. What sent shivers down his spine was the realization that the voice he heard was not telepathic. His ears picked it up akin to a whisper right behind him. Little Paragon, our paths have crossed again. Eris uttered calmly as she floated a mere tens of meters behind Felix. Her silvery hair flailing with the wind, while her piercing violet eyes were affixed on the back of his head. 1748 The 100th floor. 11. Felix and the rest of the tenants were all left stunned speechless the moment Felix turned around and saw Eris standing behind him in flesh. Many thoughts and questions roamed their minds, but there were no answers for them. All Felix could muster to utter was, how? I have my ways. Eris replied calmly while getting closer to Felix. Instinctively, Felix stepped away from her. He understood that his current strength might be enough to bully the natives, but against Unigens? He was no different than a mortal even with the force being standardized. Why, just why are you taking the three rulers' side? I don't get it, I genuinely don't. Felix remarked with a puzzled expression mixed in with a bit of dread. He knew that it wasn't the time to wonder about Eris' ways of finding him. He didn't even bother to run away, understanding that it would be near impossible in his current condition. Thus, all he could do was buy some time until reinforcement arrived. Apollo already showed me your past with Isna. You were as close as a mother and daughter, you even named her. Felix pressed on, so, why aren't you taking her side and helping me rescue her? I can understand your hopelessness before to save her, but I am here now, I can deal with the three rulers. I just need some support, I just need you to believe in me. While he was trying to buy time, Felix was genuinely troubled by the notion of Eris being his enemy. He had a great conversation with her before, and from the memories shown to him by Apollo, he recognized that she had more reasons to be on his side than against him. Unlike Uranus, who was as desperate for freedom as the three rulers, Eris didn't seem to care that much. Thus, she had no reason to be loyal to the three rulers. Eris remained silent for a moment as she gazed at his hopeful visage, his eyes reflecting a sense of expectation. It made her understand that Felix truly desired for her to join his side and had no intentions of making an enemy out of her, and he wasn't thinking as such out of fear but sorrow. Eris shook her head with a faint bitter smile and said, "Little Paragon, you won't understand, but I am already helping you." Felix and the tenants were left confused and a bit hopeful that she might have changed her mind. Alas, before Felix could respond, Eris unleashed her reality cage with a casual flick of her wrist. The atmosphere glistened for a split second, and then Felix found himself transported to a realm that defied understanding. In this realm, the ground beneath Felix's feet alternated between solid and liquid without warning, the sky changed colors with the blink of an eye, and structures materialized and dissolved in the span of a breath. Felix felt chills course down his spine as he recognized this space immediately. His clone had been caught in it before and made him feel absolutely hopeless without an ounce of resistance against Eris' authority. "How is this helping me? Are you insulting my intelligence?" Felix said with a deep frown while his mind was working hard to come up with a solution for his escape. "Just wait here patiently until Uranus and Demeter arrive," Eris uttered calmly as she sat down cross-legged. She brought out a book and started reading it in silence, not bothering to give Felix a single glance. Felix opened his mouth, but soon closed it again, understanding that words had no more use against her. "How the hell do I get out of here?" Felix's mind raced to find a way out, even though he understood that the surreal landscape obeyed no rules but those whimsically imposed by the goddess of chaos. Still, he attempted every strategy that came to mind, drawing upon the depth of his powers to break space-time, to alter his surroundings, to create a breach in the fabric of this reality, anything that could serve as his escape. Alas, he soon realized that his laws had been removed from this realm, leaving him with only water and lightning-based laws. Even his vibration control was gotten rid of. "She must have yet to figure out that you have already ascended with Zeus and Poseidon's cores," Thor remarked. "It's understandable." Lady Sphinx clarified, "Felix was still chained up by the universe, and this makes everyone assume that he has no control over all the laws whatsoever." The rest of the Unigens were not aware of the loophole Felix had taken advantage of due to the unique nature of his situation. Since Felix hadn't exposed those laws in public after entering the echoing tower, Eris had no way of finding out unless she interacted with the Vibrungians and the mercenaries in the trials. At least, this was what everyone had assumed. "What can you even do with those two laws to leave this place?" Candace asked with a worried tone. "I don't know." Felix went silent after his response. He understood that this place was an inescapable prison and Eris was its warden. The only method for him to escape was if she permitted him. As for breaching the prison from the outside, he may not be able to reach out to Apollo telepathically, but he understood that Eris wasn't dumb enough to not account for his intervention. SHT, SHT, SH*T, where did she come from? As expected, Apollo was seen floating around the visible cubic dimensional prison with a look of distress. He had arrived the moment he received Felix's SOS, alas, he was still a tad too late. He had already used many light/darkness-based attacks to destroy the dimensional prison, but none seemed to work. The dimensional prison was absorbing those attacks akin to an ever-hungry black hole, which made Apollo realize that Eris had made her prison immune to his laws. The only good news from all of this was Eris' inability to separate the dimensional prison from the tower's dimension. The tower's spacetime was under the control of the Stone of Reality, and not even Eris could alter it to her advantage. If it seemed possible, they wouldn't have failed to obtain the Stone of Reality during the old times. It was like the Stone of Reality's authority on the universe's laws was even higher than the Unigens themselves. As Apollo lowered his hands, the light and darkness fading from his grasp, he turned to his alter ego for assistance. "What do we do now?" Apollo asked with a solemn tone. "Uranus is fast approaching, and since Eris has decided to use this approach, it means she isn't at full capacity to fight us both." While Apollo hadn't figured out how Eris entered the tower with them, he predicted that she might have possessed someone. Prince Malakar was the first to come to his mind due to his bizarre ability to control his emotions when he got antagonized by Dankin. "If your assumption is correct, then Eris must be 70% weakened." His alter ego responded coldly. "Her current form is more or less the same as a clone with 30% of her original strength. However, if she were to form her core and soul, it would be a different story." Indeed, Eris was still functioning with a mere wisp of consciousness and no core. However, they understood that the true terror of chaos and order laws was the fact she could turn the impossible into possible. In other words, she seemed able to reform her core and soul even if she was locked inside the echoing tower's space-time. "The game is over when that happens," Apollo's alter ego advised, "so, you have to either get him out or get rid of her before then." "What do you think I am trying to do?" Apollo's eyelids twitched. "I asked you for assistance, not to paraphrase my **TTY situation. Ask for that girl's help. She might be able to break the prison apart with her vibration manipulation. That's actually helpful." Apollo raised an eyebrow in surprise after recalling that Commander BIA could control vibration to shape up reality to her desire. "BIA, leave the map alone and swiftly fly to the all-seeing eye," he stressed. "Hey! Why? I am so close to reaching the original map." Commander BIA seemed made confused. "There is no need for that anymore." Apollo paused. "They are already in possession of both the map and the Paragon." "Come again." Commander BIA felt her heart drop to the bottom of her stomach in dread and shock at the sound of such a horrifying sentence. When she heard "they," the only thing that came to her mind seemed the image of Uranus being in the same place as her. 1749, the 100th floor. 12. "Move it, Uranus is on the way and we have to free him before his arrival." Apollo pressured after noticing Commander BIA's silence. "I on my way." Commander BIA's emotions were somewhat settled when she realized that Uranus hadn't arrived. She switched her direction and flew towards the all-seeing eye, whose eyelid was on the verge of collapsing in exhaustion. "The moment the day cycle arrives, leave the floor immediately." Commander BIA ordered her squad, knowing that it was time to bounce. Without questions asked, Plix, Dankin, and the rest of the squad mates took off towards the exit the second the day cycle had taken over the floor. Everyone who survived the massacre had joined them in their path. They were given the scare of a lifetime and no one was stupid enough to remain behind and experience another night cycle. Apollo and Commander BIA left them be. "What am I looking at?" Commander BIA asked as she gazed at the dimensional prison. "It's a dimensional confinement created out of chaos." Apollo explained with a solemn tone, "I believe that it is capable of blocking any type of law." "Hey? How are we supposed to break it?" Commander BIA was left stunned. "I want you to change its chaotic structure using quantum energy." Apollo shared. "That, I can try." Without wasting time, Commander BIA commenced her attempt by pointing a palm at the dimensional chaotic prison and then releasing an invisible vibrational wave. The vibrational wave turned into quantum energy on its path, and when it arrived at the chaotic surface, it started to engulf the entire prison. When the invisible sphere of quantum energy surrounded the prison, she clenched her fist and uttered, "Decompose." As it made contact, a spectacular display of light and shadow occurred. Initially, it seemed as if the quantum sphere began to decompose the chaotic fabric of the prison, its orderly energy untwisting the chaotic bonds that held the structure together. Alas, before they could feel joyful, the meeting of these energies did not destroy Eris's creation, but rather, their merger forged a new, more formidable barrier, stronger and more resilient than before. The hell! It's like the chaos found a way to absorb quantum energy and strength itself through it. Apollo smiled wryly, I knew it wouldn't be so simple. This is Eris we are dealing with. When it came to chaos manipulation, the Chaotians could be said to barely scratch the surface compared to the mastery Eris had reached. Even in the quantum realm, in a foreign place, she was able to understand the structure of quantum energy and find a way to wield it on her side. This small display was enough to let Commander BIA and Apollo understand that no matter how hard they tried to change reality, the dimensional prison would remain stable since it could counter quantum energy in its origin form. Felix, any thoughts? Apollo inquired with a deep hopeless sigh as he awakened Felix's dormant wisp of consciousness inside his consciousness space. Both of them had placed their consciousness wisps inside and left them dormant for emergencies. After all, they were entering the echoing tower and it was extremely easy to get separated and lost in it. You failed in using quantum energy. Felix's wisp frowned deeply after noticing Commander BIA near him. Yes, she turned the prison into an unbreakable fortress. Apollo suggested, can you use the all-seeing eye to fire a beam at it? I can't open the eye while it's exhausted. Felix intoned, we have to wait until the night cycle arrives. Plus, I doubt it will work. In his eyes, if quantum energy was useless, then the anti-quantum energy beam would be even worse. That's because Eris must have created the dimensional prison from the elemental energy within her instead of relying on the quantum energy. For the goddess of strife and order, she could easily gain control over quantum energy. What else can we do? Apollo started to get a bit agitated. If Uranus arrived or Eris reformed her core, you are doomed. Your loyalty is always commendable. Felix's eyelids twitched in irritation as he understood that Apollo had no interest in getting caught with him. In other words, the moment Uranus arrived, he would ditch him in a heartbeat. Seeing that Apollo acted deaf to his sarcastic comment, Felix's expression turned serious again. I still have control over water and lightning laws. It seems Eris has no idea about it. Felix shared, I have a plan in mind through using those laws, but I am not certain if it will work. What is it? It goes like this. Felix narrated the whole strategy from A to Z, involving both Apollo and Commander BIA in it. When he was done, Apollo raised an eyebrow in surprise. You sure it will work? I know that Zeus can use such ability, but it's not easy to pull off, especially against Unigens. Apollo countered, we are always wary against it when dealing with him. That's why it is almost impossible for it to succeed. Felix added with narrowed eyes, but, Eris has no idea about my ability to utilize lightning/electromagnetism laws. We have a chance to pull a quick one on her. I am in, it's not like we have any other option. Apollo went on and fed the plan to Commander BIA, who was even more taken aback by how insane it sounded. However, she kept her comments to herself and left the place, heading towards the floor's exit to wait for her part of the plan. Meanwhile, Felix and Eris could be seen both sitting cross-legged inside the dimensional prison. Eris was as unbothered as always, reading her book in peace. She knew that Felix had no escape unless he surprised her. At her current stage, it was hard to surprise her. We should have a couple of months or less at most before Uranus enters the tower due to the time difference. Felix discussed with his tenants, this gives me some time to train on you guys. I only have one chance and it has to be perfect. I volunteer as a tribute. Thor offered himself. An idiot like you can't be much of a help. Ramongandra offered, I suggest Lady Sphinx, Elder Kraken, or Lord Marduk. They possess the highest intelligence among us and it should reflect some of the difficulty when doing it on Eris. I don't mind it. Lord Marduk agreed. Likewise. Lord Marduk and the rest agreed to be Felix's guinea pigs for his training. Let's start then. Felix's eyes flickered with an electrical charge as he gazed at his targets, having no interest in wasting time. He understood that Eris might seem to chill about the whole imprisonment and had given him the freedom to do as he pleased. In reality, she was also focusing her energy on reforming her core and soul, a process that wasn't to be taken lightly at all. 3 months later, Uranus and Demeter had finally set foot on the topmost floor of the echoing tower. Their presence alone marked a significant change in the tower's atmosphere. It was like the tower had recognized their arrival to be tied to an upcoming catastrophe. "Let's move it, we have already wasted enough time because of you," Uranus uttered as he walked towards a predetermined destination. "My laws are close to useless here, give me a break," Demeter replied with an irked tone while chasing after him. "Eris has already caught the main cockroach, the other one is still near him." Uranus uttered coldly, "We can't let him escape after all the sh*t he put us through. Also, I have to catch that ungrateful b*tch for daring to have thought about killing me." He kept this thought to himself. The moment they stepped inside the tower, communication with Eris was re-established and she told them about her success in capturing Felix. Before, she couldn't share with them many details since her wisps outside of the tower weren't linked with the one inside. Thus, while she could tell them that she had a mole inside the tower, she wasn't able to give them details since she likewise had no clue about them. Right now, she was guiding them towards the discovered entrances of the topmost 5 floors, turning a journey that should have lasted weeks to months of search into a journey of less than a couple minutes. 1750 The 100th floor. 13. Meanwhile, deep within the confines of Eris's meticulously crafted prison, Felix, unaware of the approaching deities, was engaged in his own critical confrontation. The moment had come for him to commit to the plan he had been formulating during the long, oppressive weeks of captivity. It's been 3 months, they should be close to the tower or even inside of it. I have to make a move, now or never. With a sharp intake of breath, Felix snapped his eyes open, their depths alight with decisiveness. Focusing on Eris, who stood before him in the guise of an unassailable jailer, Felix reached out with his mind. "You pushed into a corner," Felix stated coldly, "don't blame me for this." Before his voice could reach Eris' ears, his eyes flashed once as he gazed at the depth of Eris' eyes. Following the flash of light, the intricate web of electrical charges coursed through her brain, the network that facilitated thought, action, and, crucially, control over the prison that held them, was invaded by Felix. Then, he ordered without an ounce of mercy. Overload. The massive and powerful electrical network had every single electrical signal overcharged to the limit, causing Eris to feel like her brain was being fried alive. The overloading wasn't just causing it to overheat, but forcing it to engage with every single thought, memory, action, and the list goes on. Since the mind has a limited capacity for attending to information at any given time, even Eris couldn't help but fall victim to a mental paralysis, making it almost impossible for her to focus on a single thought. Yet, Felix wasn't done. Cell war implosion. He took advantage of Eris' inability to think or react and used his water laws to launch the same ability Poseidon used against him. Boredom. This ability caused the water within the cells to explode, causing an internal unavoidable implosion. The only reason Felix was able to defend against it ahead was due to his preparation. But in Eris' case, she had no clue about Felix's 2 ascensions and the loophole that enabled him to use laws even while chained by the universe, a phenomenon never seen before. Thus, Felix and the tenants watched as Eris' beautiful goddess-like body inflated into a water balloon and exploded into pieces, hurling blood, flesh, and body parts everywhere. The tenants were left with widened eyes as they watched those bodily fragments still mid-explosion, causing a chain of revolting fireworks to fill the void around them. He has done it. He really killed her. What a fierce combination. It's near impossible to counter it if one got ambushed. The tenants each had their own reaction to these shocking results as none of them expected Felix to truly succeed in killing Eris. While it seemed too easy, many conditions had to be fulfilled for such an attack to succeed. Lack of information, owning 2 laws that had no relation to each other and could both assault the target internally and most importantly, a weakened target. If Eris was at her peak, the moment he invaded her mind and overloaded her brain, she would have been able to stop it right there and then. Hey! How come the prison isn't going away? However, their initial delight quickly changed to confusion and concern. As the last of the fireworks faded, they noticed that the dimensional prison remained firmly in place, unchanged by Eris' death. Whoosh! Before any of them could ponder further or formulate a plan of action, Eris re-emerged in the same position she had occupied before. She was still seated with the same book in her hands, like her death was nothing but a mere mirage. Eris opened her eyes and affixed them on Felix with a hint of surprise and interest. "I must admit, little paragon, I hadn't expected you to succeed in the ascension while under the universal punishment. I had some doubts, but I am glad they were cleared now." The tenants, witnessing this exchange, were silenced by Eris's words. The implications of her statement made them feel chills course down their spine. She must have left lightning and water laws activated in her reality to clear her doubts. They came to the realization that Eris was seeking to gain new knowledge and had no problems with risking her life over it. After what happened, they doubted if there was even a hint of risk involved. "You must have set up an automatic revival measure in case you died," Felix replied with a bitter, hopeless smile. This was her reality space and she could do whatever she wanted in it. "I did more than that, but you are close enough." Eris responded calmly, her tone resembling a scolding mother. "Now that you had your fun and I gained some new information, I suggest you sit quietly. Uranus and Demeter are almost here to bring you back." She didn't even bother to move from her place or punish Felix over his attack. It was like she refused to engage in needless aggression. "I am afraid I can't do that." Suddenly, Felix's entire demeanor changed from hopeless to indifferent as he snapped his fingers right before her. The moment he did so, a deeply buried complex array of invasive electrical signals within Eris's brain were activated, causing them to make their move and formulate a single order. Freeing the Shadow's law inside the dimensional prison. The moment the order was given, a figure leaped into existence from the depth of Felix's shadow. With a flourish that only Apollo could muster, he directed his gaze towards Eris, a mischievous twinkle in his eye. "It's lovely to see you again." His voice was laced with a charm and confidence that seemed out of place in the dire circumstances. And with that, he blew a kiss towards Eris and grabbed Felix by the arm, dragging him into his shadow with a single swift tug. The entire sequence took less than a nanosecond from the neurons formulating the order to their vanishment, leaving Eris staring at Felix's empty place with a stunned gaze. A nanosecond later, Eris was brought out of her daze with a faint impressed chuckle, realizing that she was maneuvered from the start to the end. "Just when I pondered I had made the wrong decision, he goes and does this." Eris smiled as she gazed through the fabric of her prison into the distance, spotting Felix, Apollo, and Commander BIA standing right in front of the floor's exit. She figured out that they re-emerged from Commander BIA's shadow, who was stationed strategically in front of the floor's exit from the very beginning. The entire time Felix wasn't really seeking to escape from the prison by killing her, which would cause the prison to either disappear or at least weaken significantly. He aimed to implant a single command in her mind by sending invasive electrical signals that would create an irresistible order. If he didn't overload her mind at the start and fry her brain, it would be near impossible for him to plant the formulated order without her spotting it. To make sure she bought his initial attempt even harder, he had to blow her body through a cellular explosion, to make it seem like he sought her death. But in reality, that single order was the only thing on his mind and Eris genuinely hadn't pondered he would go this far. "Now, my decision seems more worthwhile," Eris pondered to herself as she stood up slowly, "but now, I will be coming at you with everything I got. Don't disappoint me, little paragon."